Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew and today we're back with another review. Today we're taking a look at the 2001 GMK Atomic Blast variant from NECA Toys. Yes, originally released I think back in 2018, I could be wrong, 2017 or 2018. It has been a few years since I've gotten this guy specifically. This is NECA's first ever attempt at a Spitfire Godzilla. And as a result, it's also one of their first flat out repaints. So with that in mind, with how NECA later did with their beams and how NECA did as far as including stuff with their figures go, for their first attempt, did they knock it out of the park, or is this thing just sad and pathetic and completely an abomination? Does it improve some of the stuff from the original release, which I still don't have as of this recording, or is this guy just fizzled out entirely? Well, let's find out. For the blue on the face, this of course, NECA decided to go for a more different take. See, instead of a base form Godzilla and then him having the blue plates and him simply shooting the beam, no, they went the extra mile and gave this thing a whole new flair that I don't think any other figure company was able to recreate on this level of creativity. See, NECA decided to just cake this thing in blue, which is exactly what they did. All of the face, well, most of the face at least, has blue paint more towards the bottom half, not towards the top, but basically where the atomic breath would be shining as far as the light reflecting off the actual body is where there is blue paint. Blue paint, sorry. For the inner mouth, there you go. We have a bunch of blue and dark blues and light blues. Sorry, I have cats. That are just absolutely phenomenal. The top, we have a bunch of light blues mixed in with a bit of darker ones to signify the gums. The teeth are individually sculpted and all painted. And of course, for the bottom jaw, I don't know why I closed it. We have the little tongue, which is cut off by the hinge. Makes sense. And of course, the rows of teeth in there as well that are more of a brighter blue. And I guess that's part of the reason why I love this thing so much, because I love Godzilla and I love blue. So a blue Godzilla, mwah, perfect combination for me. That said, the face is pretty damn sweet. The neck, however, definitely kind of carries a lot of the blue over. There's a bit of a gap where you don't get the blue, here and there for the jaw, and it definitely looks a little incomplete, I'll say. So there is going to be that unfortunate part of it. But that said, the neck segments look absolutely beautiful and are just done very well, especially the side details where you have more the base detail than up here where you get the more bigger rows of plates actually colored, and it looks very nice. That actually lead into the main row of fins. For the waist, which we'll actually take a bit of a look at here, lowering the figure down like that. For the waist, here we have, or the stomach, sorry, we have a bit more of that caked on blue, and it looks very good. We have the more indigo, dark blue, not really purple, it looks purple, but it's not purple. Hues at the shoulders with more of them towards the, kind of a strip of it going down towards the arms here, as well as the claws, which are actually really well sculpted and shaded, which actually have some pretty good detail on them, which I'm pleasantly surprised about. Look at those razor sharp claws. Anyway, going back, here we have a bit more of the paint at the midsection, which as you can see for the detailed stuff, it's a bit more squared off this time. Going to the arms themselves, just to give you guys a better look at those. Lots of nice, beautiful detail. I like how it's all the paint is obviously meant to go as a design, so it's meant to kind of go moving the arm a little bit like this, and it looks almost not seamless but really great together, all things considered. We have, of course, the abdomen here, which is a bit scuffed on mine, but that's only because of years of wear and tear. For the dorsal plates, which you might as well just get these things out of the way, they are translucent and they are beautiful. I honestly genuinely thought at one point that they were made of gummy. Look at that. Doesn't that not look like the stuff that a whale shark is made of? Like one of those gummy sharks, the whales or sharks, whatever. Like, they're all very flexible, too. A little too flexible. Mine's kind of coming out of the sockets a bit. I think I glued this one back in place a while back. No, well. I'm gonna have to do that with this one, too. But yeah, and I guess this one, too. Yeah, I don't really touch this figure on a day-to-day basis, so... As you can see, all the frosted white tips with the darkened blue centers, they look great as well, and just look the part that they should. Like, they're charging up. As well as the more blue base at the actual base of the plates, and they look great too, having their own unique paint applications, as well as a bit of like shining marks from like the forearms and the upper legs, which again, like the lighting consistency on this thing is actually pretty damn sweet. As well as a bit on the tail here, but that's a topic for another minute. Going down to the legs, where we get more like the big meaty thighs Godzilla's known for. And of course we have a bit more like the scaling, like the knee pads there. And it just looks really nice with the feet as well. Which, to go over the claws, we actually have some line work and it looks really nice. I definitely think it would have benefited from some more shading, but I think that the application for what it is done decently. I say decently because they didn't really paint it all the way. Like, I don't see why they couldn't, especially because they did it on things like the 54, I believe. Could be wrong. But that said, for the tail as well, all of the segments here are done really well. And I do like what we have here. However, if there's one problem, a little blue axis paint, there's no other paint for the tail. It is entirely one note color and popping my tail off by accident. Yeah, this thing is basically just... It's just this. It's just one color. Which is weird because NECA is known for painting all their tail spikes. Even the GMK standard version at least had painted on tail spikes. Maybe not this one, I guess. So that's going to be a bit of a con. So just as one final look at the figure itself, the side, going down to this side, as you can see, upper view, and of course the lower view. So for the sculpt and paint, the detail work is awesome. Don't get me wrong. It's actually really good. And the new paint application for what was NECA's first attempt at a Spitfire Goji, awesome. That said, I definitely think that there was a bit of a miss with this one. Because of the way that this was designed to be hunched over. And I do appreciate the addition of the more darkened color scheme because it has a more charcoal, darker color scheme in comparison to its original predecessor, which I know wasn't necessarily accurate to the film, but it added at least a bit more variety, so I'll give that figure that. But my main problem with this figure is just that it doesn't... How do I say this? I feel like aside from the blue, there's a bit of miss when it comes to like the dry brushing, the wash, which is something that even earlier mechagodzillas had. Yes, there is blue, but I feel like maybe like a bit of a gray wash would have been nice, in my personal opinion. And not to mention, while there is like some form of shading on the claws up here, or maybe that's just my eye playing tricks on me, because like, look at that, it doesn't make a return here. Plus, you have a whole section that is missing paint. So, that said, I think the pros easily outweigh the cons, but the cons do carry some weight to them. So I'm gonna say, what's a great way to, I'm gonna say a 7.5 out of 10. I definitely feel like that's a fair rating for this guy because, you know, let's bump that up to, you know, let's just lock it in at a 7.5 because I feel like what's really cool is that the blue paint looks like it's actually being shot at, well, as far as like a beam is concerned. So there is that, but really, I feel like this is definitely one of the more underwhelming as far as like the base color of it. So yeah, there's that. So 7.5 out of 10 it is. But what this figure also has is at least a plethora of movement. You've already seen it like a billion different times when I've taken a look at this guy in the past, especially that one video that spawned the "my gosh, this is stiff" gag on the channel, which I keep referencing from time to time. If you long-time viewers of the channel want to know where that's from this guy. For the jaw, we can open about this far and close up about this far. But if you notice something about the jaw sculpt, it's that when you open it, it doesn't look right. I feel like it's because the jaw sits too forward on the head, like the cut in the jaw. So I feel like if there's a bit more back and it like dug into the sculpt a little bit, and then like the 54 you can like lower it down, then it would look better. But because of that, like, look at the way that the jawline goes. That doesn't really look right, especially because this is a Godzilla that's supposed to have his mouth open. So, but for intents and purposes, you can open about that far, close it about that far. For the head, you can go down about that far, up about that far, to the left, and to the right. For the neck piece, which is a bit stiff, my goodness, say, you can actually go down about that far, and with the two joints, of course, forward about that far, and get some mild side. Not too much, but there is a bit of a swivel as well. For the shoulders, you don't get a swivel hinge. I don't believe it's one. You just get a really freed up ball joint, which allows you to go a full 360 and kind of go in and out a bit. So you can go out like that and in. For the elbows, you can go like that, like this, and can rotate at the forearm, because that's not a bicep, that is a forearm joint, because you can see where it's twisting. A ball joint here at the wrist, so you can go full 360 and swivel, do that to your heart's content. And finger hinges, which I don't believe are on rotations like the 62 Godzilla. Yeah, no, these will not move. I don't want to break mine, because if I break it, I break it. C'est la vie. That said, we have a swivel here at the waist, which I can't really get a good 360 out of it. It's very, like, this is literally all you can get. So there's that. For the weight hips, we can go out to the side, in like that. Can go a full 300, no, actually, no, not a full 360 degrees. I was going to say you can, but there's a lot of NECA gojis that can do it. This guy's just not one of them. So there is that. Hinges for the knees. So you can go in about that far, out about that far, and can rotate a full 360 ball joint swivel, of course, with the feet, the big meaty feet, and go forward and back like that. And 1, 2, 3, 4 ball joints here for the tail. And if you're wondering what I meant by it was retooled for its reissue, I think what they did was they got this joint, they got rid of this joint and fused it at this piece, so all of this could be a bending wire. I could be wrong about that, but that is what I saw on listings. So for the actual so like right here, you can get a bit of a rotation, but it's not too much. All the range is mainly going to come from here. The last three pieces, sorry. And this bendable wire, I haven't done it in a while, so we'll do it for the video. There you go. It definitely feels like there's a bit of a resistance, and also mine came busted up, and clearly it's been actually, I don't want to touch that. Look at how far it's shed. My god, I didn't even realize this. Yeah, I don't touch these figures on a day-to-day basis. It came like that out of the box, by the way. I was gonna return it, but like I didn't want to wait another 2 weeks for what was effectively a Christmas present. So I mean, then again, Christmas is like 2 weeks when I got this thing, so I could have waited. In an alternate universe, I wouldn't have this one. I'd have a more in condition one. But yeah, bendable wire from here to here, and as you can see, it loves to pop out because it is made of soft plastic. And of course, it's not a particularly long tail, but it does its job. So for the articulation, it's the same old, same old. However, again, what makes this guy's articulation a problem is going to be the hunched stance. I have tried, trust me, over the years I have tried rearing up the back, heating this guy up to the point where it literally darkens the plastic. I have reared this guy's hips up. I have tried every trick in the book, and this guy would not look straight up. Well, not like straight up as far as his head rearing up, but I mean standing upright instead of being this hunched over. I tried it. Doesn't work. I don't know why NECA decided to make it like this, but effectively, every Godzilla pose you're going to get this guy in is going to have this hunch. And to me, that's kind of a problem, because again, GMK did hunch a bit, but it wasn't this much of a hunch. And effectively, because this is the Spitfire variant, the articulation really isn't needed, especially because like when you have paint that is supposed to line up on all these surfaces, you rotate one piece and it's gonna break the sculpt. Essentially, it's gonna break the paintwork. And there are some parts of the figure where it's not even painted. So I mean, is the articulation even worth it at that point? I'm sorry, but even despite its unique posability with things like the legs and the arms, and it's serviceable enough, but at the same time, because of the way it's sculpted and the way it's painted, there's not a lot you can do with the articulation. So I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to give a 6.5. Yeah, I think that's the lowest I've ranked a mechagodzilla when it comes to articulation. Good amount of articulation, but you just can't use much without sacrificing other elements to the figure. So, yeah, 6.5 out of 10 it is. What's a bit of Godzilla without some firepower? Nearly every Godzilla that released in the lineup until this point, anyway. For the accessories, unlike Tamashii, who can charge almost $100 for a Spitfire Godzilla and not include a beam effect, I'm looking at you, 2021 Godzilla, 2001 Spitfire Godzilla, and the 1989 Spitfire Godzilla, looking at all three of you, this guy, for $25 during his release, actually came with a breath effect. And I'm actually pleased to say, for what was NECA's first take, yeah, this is very dusty as hell, this actually turned out to be an okay beam effect. But that said, it definitely pales in comparison to its successors, I guess. But let's take a look at it. So this is going to be the same mold that you saw from the 64 video, even though this is literally the 64 beam, even though it's the 2001 beam. This guy came first. Anyway, for the actual beam effect, it is going to be a more plasma-like beam instead of like a more strained out beam. So in some kind of ways, it almost looks like a fireball pending, and then this is like the smoke shredding behind. For the actual like insert part, we have this little nub and of course the teeth mold, as we'll talk about. And it's going to be made of a translucent thick blue plastic with some white sprays on the sides. For that, we actually have a bit of like wavy pattern here, then it kind of goes a little more bumpy, a lot more bumpy, and then a little bit more flare. And then of course we get to the tip, which is going to be, again, where it's shooting out. I will admit personally that this does, again, kind of look more like a fireball or anything, because like this, just look at this and tell me this doesn't look like some sort of like asteroid about to hit Earth or something, and then this is just the smoke shredding behind it. But that said, the reason why I'd say it's okay is because I feel like the spray is just that. It's just a spray. I feel like it could have used a little bit more highlights. And the detail work is actually still pretty good. And it is made from a mildly flexible plastic. It's more like the 62 material, except the 62 was a bit more flexible. This is definitely a bit more hard. But to insert it in, you're going to see inside the mouth, there's a blue peg. Mine's covered in blue, not because of the paint, but that's actually sticky tack in there. Yeah, I decided to have the idea to put sticky tack in there just because it wouldn't hold it over the years. And you're going to see this nub. Notice how it's at a downward angle. You're going to want to insert that into the mouth like this. And of course have those teeth nubs kind of like resting up against it. Close the jaw to your heart's content. Straighten the figure back out, and bada bing, bada boom, you are getting Godzilla to shoot the beam. That said, this is actually an impressive display, and this is kind of what I meant with the beam shining like from the figure. So you can actually kind of lower it, and so it looks a little bit more, I guess, natural, for lack of a better term. What I do appreciate is, I guess this might either be the sticky tack involved or not, that the figure can hold it on its own. It won't droop or sag over time, at least not drastically. It'll sag a bit in the peg, which is why there's a bit of a curve. But as a whole, this beam is actually pretty sturdy, and after all these years, it's actually done very well. So the beam itself may not be the best, but the actual presentation of the beam is really good. So for that, I have to give this thing a 7.5. Yeah, 7.5 I feel like is fair enough for this beam. And for some size comparisons quickly, here he is with some other blue mechagodzillas, with the 2019 V2 from King of the Monsters, and the NES video game appearance Godzilla from Godzilla Monsters. And so overall, for sculpt and paint, we already covered that. Overall, for my final thoughts on the figure, I think that, admittedly, I think that this was a pretty cool first attempt at an atomic breath Godzilla from NECA. It took a figure I didn't already have, and it actually gave me it in a new way. That said, I definitely think that of the NECA Godzillas that I currently have, which is almost all of them, the only ones I'm really missing are the 1984, 2003 Hyper Maser Blast, and the 2001 original variant. This is going to be, in my personal opinion, the weakest of the actual Godzillas. We're talking like strictly NECA Godzilla himself. Of the NECA Godzillas themselves, this is going to be, in my personal opinion, the weakest one. Its sculpt is great and has some amazing details, but it's just, you can't really, the design of the figure is faulted because it's hunched. The paint is incredible, where there's great paint, but there's other parts where there's just not really that much paint. It would have benefited from some dry brush and wash. The articulation, while it has a good amount of it, it's the range and the sculpt that comes down to it because it's hunched and in a pre-post position. And a lot of the paint will get cut off. And the beam effect is great, just not the best beam effect. So as a whole, I think the NECA Godzilla 2001, I can't believe I'm saying this about a NECA Goji, is in some ways a mixed bag in comparison to the others. On his own, he's good, but that's really it. He's good. He's not great. He's not mind-blowing. He's good. That said, do I recommend him? I would say, if you want to complete a NECA Godzilla collection as far as official, legit ones, sure. I would pay no more than $50 to $60 in this guy for mint packaging, whether it be the original or reissue in the poster box. That said, if it's damaged or missing parts or anything and it's still above $60, don't even look at it. Just wait on highest version, because I know that they did make a 2001 Godzilla, or making one. I don't know anything about that figure. I just saw it on BBTS and was like, oh, cool. Anyway, that's about it as far as like my personal recommendations go. But as for my final rating, I'm gonna say a 7 out of 10. It's definitely, again, the weaker ones of the figure line, but overall, it's good. It's pretty good. Pretty good's a bit of a stretch, but it's somewhere between good and pretty good. So, with that said, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. With that being said, hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew, and today we're taking another look at another NECA Godzilla. That's right, continuing on treading through the world of NECA Godzilla history. And today we have what was one of two final sculpts, not figures specifically, but sculpts that would lead into the repaint of Godzilla figures from the line. One of them was the 1989 Godzilla, which we took a look at a few videos ago, and this one, which is the 2003 Godzilla from Tokyo SOS. Yes, that's right. So this was, of course, one of NECA's last sculpts they released, and one of two last figures they released as far as repaints go, that being the biollante Bio Attack, which I also did a review of, and the figure that I don't have, the Hyper Maser Blast Godzilla, which was like basically this guy just all decked out in yellow and blue. That said, for this figure in particular, I actually have a fond memory of actually trying to get this guy. I will say the seller was a bit hard to actually kind of come by because I wasn't used to trying to buy stuff, so my way of communication was a bit funky, but hey, I'm a lot older, I'm a lot more experienced, so I have a bit more experience when it comes to like buying figures. So that said, this is obviously going to be based on the 2003 version, which if you don't know the difference between the 2002 and the 2003, basically this one has the scar and this one doesn't, as well, or the 2002 version does not. Which is kind of weird because you'd think that NECA would actually use this guy and not do the scar and just call that the 2002 Godzilla. But they didn't. They went the extra mile to just go right out of the gate, make a 2003 Goji, and not really make a 2002 Godzilla, which kind of sucks because I feel like they could have at least maybe tried to do it, just remove the scar and send the prototype off to Toho. I mean, effectively, that's really all they could have done, but that said, we're going to be taking a look at this guy in particular. So, with that said, being the biggest NECA Godzilla aside from the 2014 12-inch tall variant, does this guy live up to the expectations of being the tallest, or does he come up short as far as quality is concerned? Let's find out. When we take a look at the sculpt and paint for the head, you're going to notice something pretty cool, and that's the figure is casted in a pretty much a flat gray plastic with a lot of nice dry brushing, and you can kind of see what I mean by like the kind of dirtier wash on this guy being used. We have the nostrils or the nose, which I will say it's a bit incorrect as far as like where it's kind of sculpted because one's a bit higher up than the other one is. You can kind of see that. But as you can tell, there's at least a lot of detail to be found here because here we have a bit more like the cheeks here where it meets the nasal cavity, and they look really nice. I will say the detail work is just phenomenal. And then we have the standard kind of like oval shaped scales spanning backward to the ears. The eyes, I'll admit, they do look a little derpy, but that's only because the 2002 Godzilla kind of mostly looked up, and I'm getting like tons of cat fur. Again, I have like 3 cats, so there's that. For the actual eye, they have a very shiny finish with kind of like a black highlight with a white base, and it looks really cool. For the ears, not too much is going on here. We're having like a big, nice oval-shaped ear, and so it looks really sweet. Looking inside the jaw, actually, let's quickly cover the eyebrows. They're actually quite big, quite thick, and very well dry brushed. We have, again, the gray base with some more brownish wash in there. Looking inside the mouth, which, let's open up the mouth, there we go. The teeth are individually sculpted and painted, and they actually have some pretty cool paint jobs on there. And for the mouth itself, it's very well detailed and has like a very rough texture. And you can also see the top of the mouth has some pretty interesting detail as well. And the tongue is very roughed up. I think I just said that, whatever. But it looks really cool. There's actually no visible hinge. Well, actually, there is kind of one, but it's like very well blended into the sculpt. So they did improve that over time, which is something I do like. So as you can see, he constantly looks up, so there's going to be that. The bottom of the jaw, just to briefly look, but banging in my camera, very well sculpted, very well detailed. Now let's talk about the neck piece, which it's going to be the bit of, well, let's talk about an articulation. That was my chair, don't worry. Or it was just my back, and I'm being an idiot. Obviously, it was my chair. We have this big neck piece, which for the spine work, it actually is pretty well done. We have a bit of like frosted tips, as we'll talk about with the fins. And this time around, they are made of a more rubbery plastic, which I guess it's more akin to what they did in the more classic era Godzilla figures, like the 94 and 84. But this is actually still very well done. The mold down here, again, we have all the like diamond oval shaped scales, and kind of goes down with the brown wash. The caterpillar segmented neck, as you can see, has like the more smoothened out details, and of course the spiky bits at the end. And of course this side as well with the very broad shoulders. Let's go to the scar itself really quick. As you can tell, the scar is very glossy, and that makes it stand out a bit from the actual design of the figure being a lot more matte in terms of its paint job. As you can see, it has quite a bit of a purple finish as well. So it's a bit purplish brown, not like vibrant purple, but it definitely helps a bit. So it kind of starts up here, and then you have 2 segments, 3, 4, and then ends down there at the pelvis. So going to the arms, very short, stubby arms, of course. Got a lot of nice dry brushing and detail here. For the claws, they don't have any shading, but they do have a decent paint application, I will say. They are painted all the way. I think I would have liked some more highlights on the claws, but then again, everything else is like kind of dry brushed and washed. Just to kind of show you more like the stomach itself. The dry brush is there, as long as with the detail. Now let's talk about the dorsal plates, like in general, in full, moving back to camera. These are some beautiful dorsal plates. Are they my favorite? Maybe not. Because they do feel, personally, a little flimsy. I think I would have liked a more solid feeling. Funny enough, the side fins actually do have that exact feeling. I think it's honestly because... Nope, that's debunked. They are a separate piece. I thought they were originally part of the sculpt. Nope, they are in fact a separate piece. You can kind of see what I mean. If we zoom in real in, I think that's a little too far. You can kind of see there's a seam line. Yep, that's like literally as far as I can zoom in. So putting it back to order, there we go. For the bigger fins, we actually do get a very well done amount of detail work here, with the gray centers and the frosted white tips that are all dry brushed and washed. Have a beautiful transition, especially the middle rows. And what I always appreciated about the Kiryu Saga Godzilla is that it has a lot more of like a crystal-like appearance than the more, I guess, symmetrical, oval-esque shaped appearance of the Heisei fins. So it definitely spices things up with the overall design. For the thighs here, proportionally they aren't as big as other NECA Godzillas, but they're still big and chunky. I mean, of course, something's got to support all that weight. Realistically speaking, this guy would just shatter himself, but this is semi-realism. It's just believable that he would have large legs to accommodate such a big body. That said, I will admit, the folds in the skin do give off the illusion that this guy is more of a suit than anything as well. But as far as the actual details are concerned, we do have almost like a bit of a wavy pattern. You see that? It's almost like a wavy type. And that's honestly something I do like. So it gives this guy a bit more of a unique display presence, because we have a bit of a fold right there, and then we have a bit of dry brushing across the sides with more of the sculpted details, the kneecaps, and of course this side of the legs as well. For the underside of the feet, there and there, with peg holes, and for the actual feet, more of that dry brushing on the feet themselves, not so much on the claws. They do have a good amount of detail, and of course we have the 3 front toes with the back toe right there. It's kind of one note, although they do kind of have a little bit of like transition at the base. I think I would have liked some more detail. But speaking of detail to tail, here is the tail, the longest of the NECA Godzillas in history, coming in at what, 13 inches? This is an absurdly long tail, which, like, to put this into perspective, I don't really have anything on me. Like, this is like the entirety of nearly the entirety of my forearm. That is a friggin' long tail. But going from the base, we do have some of that amazing sculpted work with the dry brushing and all the individually painted and sculpted fins that go right to the tippy tail. And just to kind of roll it over to this side. Looks great, doesn't it? Here's a bit of an overshot of that. All the individual segments. And of course the smoothened out dry brush of the tail underneath. So let's have one final look at the sculpt and paint. So here's this side. Here's this side. Overside, bird's eye view, and underside. So, for the S.O.S.G as far as the sculpt and paint is concerned, while he's not necessarily 100% accurate, you can still identify that this is the 2003 Godzilla. Do I have any pros or cons? I will say the pros are the detail work is excellent. I love what we have here. The dry brushing, I'll admit as well, is personally really good, and I do like it. The only thing I don't really like, I'd say, are going to be the claws, because they are a bit more one note in comparison to a more, not vibrant, but kind of a, what's the term I'm looking for? Bit of a diversive body, because you actually have dry brushing over the base color. And I think this guy would have benefited from some colored claws or shading, kind of like what the 62 Godzilla had. Maybe that's not what he had in the movie, but I definitely think the figure could have benefited. But aside from that, I do love the way that this thing overall looks. And it's also very big as far as size goes. We'll talk about that in the size comparison. But on its own, it's going to be a 9 out of 10. I love what we have here. Articulation time, and this is where things kind of start turning a bit. We have a jaw hinge, which can go, pushing it can go this far wide, shut that far in. For the head, we can go a full 360 degrees and go up some, down some, to the left and right. And you might see there's no segment at the neck. Let me show you what they did. Now, when promotional pictures dropped for this guy, I'm probably using one for the thumbnail, you actually might have noticed that there's no cut here. That is because when they actually made the articulation cuts, instead of like segmenting it on the neck, they actually cut the entirety of like what's essentially like the bust of it, like the profile, and cut it right to the shoulder pads. And essentially the shoulders are now inside of it, and it just kind of looks weird when you pose it. So basically this entire top half moves from the second dorsal plate up. Everything is entirely on one piece, which, I mean, there really kind of wasn't a use for this joint because you can barely get kind of a rotation. It does move a bit. It's just you have to do a lot of finessing. And you can go a little up and down, but effectively, I don't really see the point in this joint because as soon as you swivel it, boom, there goes the scar, there goes the dorsal plate alignment, and here you got this weird, ugly flap. So I don't know what NECA's thought process was. Maybe they just couldn't get a joint that looked cohesive. Like maybe if they try to cut it up here. But I definitely think cutting up down here was not the way to go. I've always kind of found that a little confusing. But on the flip side, when you move the shoulders, these big flaps are going to be on a bit of like a flexible rubber. So it doesn't get a whole lot of the way in the articulation department. So you can get a full 300, maybe not a full 360 degrees, but kind of close to. You can get a bit of like a rotation. And you can actually go pretty far out and pretty far in. These elbows, you can go in like that, out, and rotate a bit, swivel hinge, and rotate at the wrist, and hinges for the fingers, So that's a good aspect. The waist is very nice because you can actually go a bit backward, bit forward, twist side to side, and lean side to side, just like that. For the hips, we can go, oh, not really all that much. It's definitely not meant to be like that. It's mainly kind of meant for a bit of a rotation, but I will admit, these legs are very much limited. I guess it's just because of how narrow they are. They weren't probably able to put like a good joint in there, but come on. Swivel hinges for the knees, which are still stiff beyond belief, but you can get a fine rotation there. Ball joint here at the foot, which has a pretty decent pivot. And we do get a very nice swivel there. And then we get a couple ball joints, which we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 segments, all the way down to the tip of the tail, and from here to here is a bendy wire, which mine's actually not starting to poke out, but it's almost there. It's almost on its way of poking out right there. Kind of notice a little curve? That is gonna be the that's gonna be it. Anyway, so yeah, essentially they brought back the hybrid tail, but it's a bit more, I would say 95% ball joint, 5% bendy wire. So that said, what do I think of the articulation? I definitely think that there are some good parts here, like the mouth and head, great. Shoulders, really good. The legs could use a little bit of work, but the tail, you can get so much range out of this thing. Like, it goes all the way up here, you can go all the way down, straighten it out if you wanted to, go to the left, go to the right, and it all holds its pose. And it's kind of a big, beefy tail, which I don't know how NECA was able to do that, but they definitely did. It's gonna be this neck joint which really puts me off, because the neck piece, while it's not essential, it's so distracting when they do stuff like this, and it doesn't even look that 100% cohesive. Like, NECA, this is no way like my personal attack, it's just criticism. Then again, it's criticism of a line you discontinued, so I don't really know if you're going to take it. I don't even know if you're watching this review, but at the same time, there had to have been a better way to do this. So I am going to dock off points for that. But overall, the articulation, while it's slightly weaker than it should be, I'm going to give this thing an 8 out of 10. Because the articulation as a whole, still pretty good for what you get. For some size comparisons, here he is with some other Kiryu Saga figures in my collection, with the SH Monster Arts 2002 Godzilla, and the Bandai bootleg Movie Monster series Kiryu, which, as for the scale, I bought this guy specifically for him just because I knew from the start these two would go together, so maybe he's not meant for him. I mean, literally look at this. If anything, I think, even though in the film they were about the same height, I mean, Toho scaling kind of sucks, because they're the same guys who admit Mothra larva from the Showa era fighting against a 50-meter tall Godzilla is over 200 friggin' meters long. Like, that doesn't work at all in the movie scaling, but apparently it's official. Anyway, he's supposed to be taller at 60 meters, which doesn't make sense because he's built around the 54 Godzilla, which is only 50 meters, versus this one, which is about 55 meters, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. I think he's either 50 or 55 meters. Again, it's been a while since I watched Tokyo SOS. It's been a while since I've necessarily watched any of the classic films, but that said, I think I've kind of rambled long enough. But as for these two specifically, I made a video a while back. I probably will remaster it just like I remastered the Monster Arts 2019-2021 comparison, but you'll see that in the near future. And for another size comparison, here he is with the 1989 Godzilla simultaneous released and the NECA 2014 Godzilla original version. And as you can see, there is a clear, stark difference of where NECA started and where NECA ended. Because this wasn't the exact end of the line, but it was the last sculpts they released for the line. If you include the repaints of the Biollante Bio and the Hyper Muser Blast variants of these two. But you might have noticed I didn't cover accessories, and I kind of want to ask something. bringing me to a dilemma, if you will. A Godzilla NECA dilemma. You have two figures that were simultaneously released, both base Godzilla. Okay, what seems to be the issue? This guy comes with a beam effect. This guy does not. They both get repaints. Okay, this guy comes in a biollante, puke all over the place version, whatever, okay. Also includes the beam effect. This guy, while it's not necessarily a Spitfire, it is a variant that is getting charged at and also has blue dorsal plates. Granted, not all of them are blue, but some of them are. And it still doesn't get a beam effect. What was the thought process? Again, just a general question. Why didn't this guy get a beam, but this one did? Same price, released simultaneously, and you guys included a beam effect with nearly every Godzilla release post 62, almost, except for 2014, sorry, the reissues 2019 V1 and V3. But come on, please. I mean, it's kind of too late, but whatever. But overall, also if you're wondering which beam this is from the 2019 V2 beam. I think just stylistically it works the best with this Godzilla because Godzilla 2002/3 had a much more mainstream light beam. I think that this figure is pretty damn sweet overall. Is it perfect? Again, no, it's not. It has flaws. The claws I don't really like in comparison to the rest of the body, and the way that the actual like nape is done is not that great. That said, I think that the mold is very well done. Very crisp with its detail. The articulation, again, it's pretty good for what you get. The neck piece is just something I don't really like. The head's great, shoulders are good. The legs could be a little improved on, but the tail, awesome. And I do think the lack of a beam effect, especially during NECA's heyday, for lack of a proper term, even though this was nearly the last of their figures, it's a bit sad because they never included a beam effect with this one, and I think that a 2003 beam effect would at least look pretty damn cool. That said, do I recommend this in 2025? You know what? Yes. Why? Because the average resale price on the cheaper end is about $40 to $60 from what I've seen, and if you're able to snag one up for that price, hey, you're walking away a happy camper. I actually had 3 at one point. I gave my other 2003 and actually another 62 to my, 64 to my dad. So if you're watching this, Dad, hey, hope you still have them. That said, I'm going to rate this guy an overall rating of 8.5 out of 10. That said, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone.
Say what you will about Godzilla Evolved being pink, but how is this evolving Godzilla that's pink? Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew, and today we're continuing our review marathon with the NECA Godzilla line. We're almost done. After this, we just have to do the King of the Monsters figures. And for this one, we're going to be taking a look at the NECA Shin Godzilla Spitfire version, or the Atomic Blast variant. So this was before NECA, or I guess Toho, was kind of like demanding companies to stop using the word atomic and just call it like Spitfire, Heat Ray, or actually I think they were calling some figures like Spitfire, like the Spitfire 2014 from Monster Arts, but regardless, Heat Ray was kind of like the general namesake for a little while, and this was before that. Anyway, so this is of course NECA was one of 2 figures from their Shin Godzilla movie line that depicts him in a purple hue spitting off his atomic breath. And this was actually the first of the 2 that I got before I bought the bootleg of the original. This one was a gift from my sister, so thank you very much. Of which this is still in actually decent condition. Has it been used? Yes, it has, but it still has got quite a lot of merit. So with that said, we're going to be taking an updated 2025 look at the King of Monsters in pink. Technically purple, but it's pink. So, before I actually just quickly start, I should probably clarify that I did give this guy a bit of a rinse in between takes. So, he is going to be a bit wet throughout this review because he's still drying, as you can kind of see in the socket, a little reflective. Anyway, also, this is going to be the original release, not any of the reissues in like the fancy style poster box packaging with the Shin Godzilla movie poster on it, the one where it's like standing almost full body. Yeah, that one. So yeah, this is the original one in the clamshell, which I think, to my knowledge, this was the final release in the clamshell boxes before they moved over to more like the 5-panel packaging. Anyway, so for the face, we have a brand new head sculpt from the original. The new head sculpt is going to be having his mouth wide open, and as you can see, the details do make a return with the various bumps and crevices, the tiny beady white eyes with the small black pupils that are actually really well painted. Let's actually kind of get in there and really get like a good sense of like what we're working with here. Look at that. There you go. So it's actually pretty well sculpted. I want to get like a good detailed look at this. So yeah, we got like a ton of like dry brushing, and that eye's a bit off center, quite a bit. It's kind of funny actually seeing it sculpted in, but yeah, there is that. We have a bit of dry brushing when it comes to the actual face, so of course with the red kind of seeping through the black over spray, and just to kind of extend back outwards. Ooh, my throat. We have the individually painted teeth. I can't really say they're individually sculpted because they're kind of like sculpted together. That just looks like they're individually sculpted, but no. The teeth kind of start right there, and they kind of work their way around throughout the whole head, as you can see, and then the bottom jaw splits into two. And I do want to talk about like the part where like Spitfires on repaints that I've seen on various listings. I did see that it does look quite a bit better than mine. Here, it definitely has like the pink, and then it kind of dry brushes it with a bit of a darker purple, but I feel like it kind of stops too early on mine because it just has the base coloring after a certain point. There's a bit of pink, but it just looks more like I don't even know how to call it. It looks like he's eating something. Also, the peg hole, I feel like could have been done a little bit better. It almost looks like he has like a third eyeball, which is a bit iffy. You kind of actually see inside there. It's very much red in there. But yeah, the mouth detail actually does look pretty well nice. And you do have like a bit of like a magenta, purple to red going on, so that does look really well done. And I do like the triangular look of the actual head shape. Just to kind of move the jaw down because I don't think I really covered a whole lot. There's the bottom of the jaw where it splits. Now for the neck. How do I best put this? The neck is very much colorful. It has the purple dorsal plates with the white kind of like base, and then the black tips mixed in with the red at the base of its body, and then of course back to the gills, which are going to be kind of painted a little bit purple. It's a bit sloppy, like half of it here is painted, half of it's not. This section's missing, this whole thing is painted, that section's missing, so on and so forth. So it does look a bit sloppy, especially for NECA's earlier days, because to my knowledge, even like things like the 1954 Godzilla were actually really well painted with its cracks and crevices, but here it just doesn't really look that right. I think same could also be said for the collar, the collarbone. I don't know why I struggle to say collarbone, but you can kind of see that like it kind of is very, very thick. Like there's no substance to it really. All they just really did was take a brush and just kind of goop it on there. You could maybe argue that it was trying to go for like a very glowy illuminating effect, but I feel like the mouth, even though it does dial back on the purple paint a bit than it should, did a much better job than this. And also a bit of mine is missing the paint, so yippee. Also, we do have a bit of nice more wrinklage and detailing and scales, so there are a bit of extra details to work with there, so that's pretty good. Next up, we're actually going to just immediately talk about the dorsal plates. I've got a bit of like an issue with my dorsal plate, like where this back one was like bent right out of the box, and I've had this thing for like at least like 7-8 years. So to this day I still can't get this thing to properly unflex, quote unquote. So I guess I'm stuck with the bent dorsal plate for the rest of my life. Anyway, the dorsal plates could be a bit better because really there's a lot of white space and a lot of purple space. Again, I know reissues definitely fix this problem, but at the same time, for my personal copy, I'm allowed to judge what I have and only what I have. And that said, what I do have isn't necessarily the best. This purple, beautiful. If the whole back was just this purple, I don't think I would be complaining. It has a nice display presence of purple. Like this big chunk, and then these like little dorsal fins back here looks actually kind of like wrapped around to the other side. We're going to see a bit more of the purple here. But the problem is the white is just too obvious. Like it's not really transitioning. It's not really the base of it. It almost looks like, you know what it looks like? They painted it purple originally, but they had like a ton of this white paint and it like seeped through it. That's honestly kind of what it looks like. Again, I know that NECA tried to do like an illuminating effect, but honestly, it doesn't really look that great. And the tips of the plates being black really kind of confuses the whole like look, because you think if they were like illuminating, because keep in mind, Shin Godzilla's almost whole fin illuminates, then this thing would have been applied a little bit better, but it's a little iffy. But the dorsal plate mold is still really well done, and I do dig it, especially like these back plates and like these more smaller plates, and then of course you have like the sides, the outskirts of the actual dorsal fins. So those are actually done really well. I feel like another thing what I can give this figure is definitely going to be the red accents on the torso and the arms, because the arms, while small, have a lot of rich, muscular, fiber-like details that just look swollen and very withered. And you see all like the muscular vein details, especially how skeletal it looks. And like, come on, my boy Shin, you gotta kind of work out those arms. Then again, look who's talking. Anyway, look at the arms just in general, and the claw paint actually looks pretty well applied. Granted, it doesn't have like as much shading as you would expect, but for the size of the arms, I really do dig it. Do we have some like red spots because of the articulation? Yeah, I guess because like they may have missed it, but whatever. The actual like red is just done really well where there is done well red. And here we have the actual like chest and stomach and pelvis. Again, this is actually what the purple should have looked like, at least on the collarbone and the gills. This is what it should look like. It should have been like more in the gaps and really peering through as if it's like what this thing is glowing and is about to kill you. And the red here, again, it's done so well. A bit of like the side profile where we do get more like the muscular veinature type colorization, as you can see there. For the thighs, Shin Godzilla's big meaty thighs, which yes, they're big here, but they're not as big as I don't think they are in the movie. So we have all this like crisp detail here and all this like very muscular curvature detail. Again, it just looks very mushy and it looks very weird. And again, I think that's what Shin Godzilla is supposed to look like, you know, very withered and such. And we also have a bit of like extra detailing, like more towards here. It is like a bit smoothened out here. I'm not quite sure what this is from, because you can see that this part's like these few bits here, and here are very well smoothened out. My guess is that maybe like the mold just didn't seep well into the press the NECA wanted, so maybe there's that. I'm actually just noticing that now. Yeah, even a figure you've had for almost 10 years Still surprises you to this day, huh? I like those types of figures. Going back to this side, we actually have a bit more like the red detail going towards the kneecap. And this part kind of dials back on the red. So it's definitely inconsistent, but I think I would have liked a little bit more consistency. The red here on the knee, lower knees, like the shin, pun of the year. We actually have a bit more of the red here seeping through the gaps, and I do like it. As well as the feet, which kind of dial back on the red paint. And also, if you're noticing, it doesn't have the extra toes. Yeah, NECA only opted to go for the 4 toes, which is a bit weird because, you know, that's kind of like one of Shin Godzilla's defining characteristics. Also, if you're wondering, yes, there is no extra finger on the hands. And the claws here do look very well done. I love the shading on them. And again, they just look very crisp, and I do love the look of them. Bottom of the feet, take it or leave them. And the tail. I kind of have mixed opinions about the tail. Well, mainly with articulation, but we'll talk about that. The paint. Why couldn't the whole figure look like this? Like, look at this purple. Look at how it's mixed in with the white. Where it's dark, it's dark. Where it's light, it's light. This is what the purple should have looked like. The whole figure. And even then, it kind of loses it a little bit with the next 2 segments. But actually does keep a good job with actually like keeping the red as well. Also noticing there's a bit of like purple accents. Oh, the live beauty of HD recording, ladies and gentlemen. And for my personal least favorite part of the figure is going to be the tail itself, where it meets the head. Because there's really not a lot to talk about. It is just a basic curved Godzilla tail. And we have the tail on the face, which there actually is no face, but we do have a bit of like purple, kind of, mostly white paint. And of course, again, like I may mention, the second face is not there, but we do have a peg hole. So, with that said, what do I think of skeleton paint? I think that the Shin Godzilla, in my personal opinion, I do think it's a bit better than its original. Then again, I am basing it off of bootleg and pictures I've seen online. But for my personal taste, there's still some parts of this guy that I feel like could have been done a little bit better. Could have been done like a little bit more up to NECA's then quality, because the purple on the back and even the purple on the collarbone, they had the right color choice with the purple, especially here on the 2 the 2 base tail pieces. This is what the whole figure should have looked like, not like this where it almost looks like it's unfinished. That said, I think the red detail work and the actual paint aside from it is near perfect. It's very chaotic and has a lot going on. In some ways that's good, some ways it's bad. That applies to this figure too. But if I had to personally give a score, I would say, let's go 7.5. It's very cool where it's cool. It's not that great where it's not that great. And one piece of it is just not that good in general. But overall, yeah, I've honestly seen worse. So, sculpt and paint, I would say gets a 7.5. Just a quick side note, is anyone gonna go see the Shin Godzilla re-release? Yeah, it's happening next month in August. Let's move if you are, much like the next segment, which is articulation. Now, for the first time in mechagodzilla history, and to my knowledge, I think the only time, we don't actually have a jaw hinge. We have a big split jaw, obviously, because it's all one sculpt to accommodate the beam. But we can actually get a pretty good rotation as well as a side to side, up about this far, down about this far. So not too much up and down, but we do get a nice side to side. Again, 360. The neck really enhances it by allowing you to go all the way down. There's a bit of a crowd on my fingers because I just got done eating spaghetti. And then raise it up this high together. You can go to the left, to the right, and you can actually kind of make it loose, so you can kind of go like a full 360. Although I think that's just because of the way that like it almost pushes the rod out of place, so do keep a bit cautionary with that. For the shoulders, quote unquote shoulders, we can go up, down, forward, and back. There's a mild rotation there, but you're not going to get too much out of. Straighten out, bend in, and rotate like that. Swivel hinge here at the wrist, not too much there. I hope it's not broken. Okay, good. It was kind of loose, like in the peg there for a sec. We have a ball joint here at the waist, so not too much movement. You can go a little side to side, mild tilt, mild back and forth. Again, it's very mild, and even if you could, the rubber fins would scrape up against each other, so do keep in mind of that. The legs, we can go kind of out to the side a bit. We can go a full 360 right there, and you kind of taught me when I was talking about like the red paint. Essentially, the whole figure, like in base, is like red plastic with black accents over top, when I think in reality it should actually be reversed. It should be black purely with the red kind of seeping off. Actually, I think that's whatever. Anyway, yeah, full 360. This left leg is a bit tighter than the right leg. For the knee, you can get a hinge movement as well as a swivel. Hinge and swivel. And a ball joint here at the foot, which you can go up and down, left and right. See this one? A little bit more freed up. And you can also do a full 360-degree rotation. And for the tail, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections of ball joint, but you can't really use it. See, the whole let's actually talk about it briefly later, but you can actually do get some decent side to side with the base if you rotate it, and then if you try to like bend it, where it looks a bit more natural. It does look a bit fluid, although if you do bend it down, you're going to get some pretty nasty gap. Although there is a bit more sculptage, it's not really meant for that. And then from here to here is going to be pure bendy wire, but I have a QC issue with mine. Let's see if I can actually pop it off. So popping off the bendable part of it, my tail actually has, this is actually like the closest I've actually seen in a while. You can actually see that the bendy wire has poked through the rubber and over the years has started scraping up against the ball peg, which is why I don't move this thing a whole ton, but really you should be able to get like about the fluid movement. And because of the fact that it's misplaced, I cannot get this thing to move. This literally feels like a thing of solid plastic, although it's clear that it does have a metal wire. So whatever happened at the NECA factory, that is definitely a QC issue. And so for articulation, also just to clarify, this tail tip does not have a ball peg of its own. It is entirely glued in. So that clarification out of the way. What did I mean by the articulation, you couldn't really use it? Well, let's break this down. The articulation, technically speaking, it has a lot of joints. It has a bit of head joints, arm joints, waist joints, leg joints, and tail joints. A bit of everything that you'd at least want from a Godzilla figure. The only thing that it would really be missing, so to speak, is a jaw hinge, but that it's Spitfire, so it doesn't really need one. The thing that I mean by the articulation is that the NECA Shin Godzilla, upon design, was meant to be in one specific pose, and then they cut the articulation. Because when you're sculpting a figure, you sculpt it in a certain pose. It wasn't like, it was obviously the same thing for Shin, but I really doubt that NECA actually took the time to look at this and really decide how it should move. Because that's the problem here. The tail especially is evidence of it, because it breaks away and it's pre-posed. Yes, Shin Godzilla's tail does look like this in a neutral stance, but I feel like if NECA really wanted to give this thing the maximum treatment as far as the articulation is concerned, the tail would have had to be like maybe a bit like flat on the ground. Then they made the articulation cuts and engineered it in a better way than just this, where you're basically forced to keep upright like this for the entirety. And also, that's another thing. Mine kind of has a tendency to droop, so yay. That's not necessarily a fault on NECA's. It's more like maybe my own my own problem over the years. But that said, I'll say that you can get some nice poses like of the head, like maybe shooting the beam upward to the sky, or maybe having him bent over a bit. But as it stands, you can't really use a lot of the movement, especially since Shin Godzilla is a rather static creature. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the grand scheme of things as well. So for articulation, I'm going to give this thing a 7 out of 10. Good articulation, but you can't really use a lot of it without it looking awkward. Next up is accessories. And what's a bit of Godzilla? Spitfire versions with a bit of firepower, huh? Well, thanks to our folks in NECA, they actually came with two Spitfire beam effects. Atomic breaths. I don't know why I keep saying the word Spitfire. One's a bit longer than the others. I mean, it really doesn't matter which beam goes in which, but essentially you have the head beam and the tail beam. And I'm just gonna come out and say it, NECA. This is definitely gonna be your worst beam effects of your Godzilla line. Let's talk about them. So for the actual mold, this is kind of what I mean by being the worst. Because yes, they do have quite a bit of detail work on them. But much like the body, it doesn't have a lot of purple. Like, yes, it has a mild purple spray towards the middle. But you can even see at the tip that it's like translucent. And it's so obvious that there's a metal wire like going here. Like, this isn't a bendable wire. I don't know why. Is it? I don't know. I felt something in there. Really hoping I didn't break that. Anyway, but yeah, this thing is not a bendable wire. I don't know why it would be, because Shin Godzilla's beam is straight. And it's mostly just a white thing of plastic. Like, in my personal opinion, you guys should have just done what you did with the V2 Godzilla from 2019. I know that would come a little bit later. But essentially, you have this metal rod and some okay sculpted details. Kind of more on the flat side. But yeah, you take this peg and you're going to see the peg hole in the mouth. And you're going to literally just peg it in there. Boom. He is spitting off the beam. It looks okay. I see it looks okay because that metal rod is still kind of exposed, even if you get it like really shoved in there. Also, if you're wondering what this like piece of glue is, it's literally just that, it's glue. I tried to like thicken up the metal plastic when I was younger, but I didn't realize it didn't work on plastic. It worked on metal. It only worked on plastic. So when I shoved it in there, I just kind of scraped it towards the front, and it's been there ever since. And as for the tail beam, again, more or less the same thing. It's just a bit smaller. Realistically, you can go in any which way you see, please. Let's actually kind of get into frame. So, a little peg hole in there, stick it in. At least it covers most of it. But I mean, that probably could just be because of my glue. There you go. And there you go. He is shooting the tail beam. So, I can't really get it into frame because if I do it like this, then it's gonna bump up into my Titan Godzilla from Playmates. But essentially you get, all things extended, the longest NECA Godzilla that is ever released. I don't know if this is longer, like a presentation-wise, say longer than the 24-inch long Godzilla. I'd actually have to look at the measurements on this thing. I don't have a ruler or like a measuring tape on hand. But I'm honestly a bit as far as like the display of this thing goes. I think it's cool in concept, and NECA had all the ingredients for this thing, but I don't know. Something about it, I guess just because like the beams themselves don't do a whole lot of justice as far as like the purple itself, all the detail that should go into a beam effect like that. And this isn't going to be like anything like out of the ordinary, but NECA is known for cramming in a lot of accessories with their figures. So, in my personal opinion, this should have also came with maybe some of the other beams of style that the Shin Godzilla has in the film. Like, for example, the smoke breath. We could have gotten like this little dome that you like plug into his mouth, or maybe have him bend over and rest into his mouth. Or the fire effect. Could have done that pretty well. I guess you'd be stuck with the 56 KOTM Godzilla beam effect. But that said, the beam effects we do here are, I'm going to say it, a bit on the mediocre side. On one hand, they have a very nice display presence, being a very long, and you're going to have a lot of shelf space, and they're great for display. That said, the actual quality of the beam effects, not very good. I don't think it was me, but I remember on a listing, it was broken, like right out of the box. So, not really necessarily the best. But for what we do have, it was pretty good. This is a good display, but the beam effects themselves, not very good. You do have a bit of display variety. I mean, you can swap the beams, maybe swap that beam out, leave that beam in, or take that beam out, put that one in. And also, I don't imagine them doing the back beams, because otherwise you'd have like a dozen peg holes in the back, so that would look a little But really, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10 as far as the actual accessories go, so there is going to be that. Being your average 6-inch tall figure, 6.5 more precisely, this guy is going to basically be quite a solid presence in a 6-inch display, with featuring some other Godzilla figures of the same scale. Here he is with the Bandai MMS Shin Godzilla, the original release, I should clarify, and the next review in the NECA line, the mechagodzilla 2019 V1 from Godzilla King of the Monsters. And for some other size comparisons, here he is with the Toys Exquisite Basic Godzilla 2014, my latest figure, actually now technically, so to speak. I mean, technically, yes, my newest figure, because I did order those, the lamp and the biollante and the mess figure before I got this guy, but I opened them when I came back, so whatever. Really define newest for me. And the Diamond Select Toys Bust Bank Godzilla 1989 from Godzilla vs. Biollante, or as you longtime channel viewers know him as, Derpy Godzilla. And finally, the last size comparison, with the comparison you guys have probably been waiting for, the original release NECA Shin Godzilla from 2016, bootleg version, I should probably clarify, and the closest thing I have to the SH monster, it's Godzilla 2016, the Godzilla Ultima, yes, from the world of SH Monster Arts, because why the hell not? Anyway, I do plan on picking the original release up. I am very close to. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it off, but we'll see. We'll see if it happens. Then at this point, let's close this out. And so for my final thoughts, for the final, not chronological as far as timeline is concerned, but the last Toho Godzilla chronological film-wise goes, this was, or from NECA, I should probably clarify, this was a pretty way to kind of end it off. On the surface, this figure does provide a lot of good things. It has a Very nice sculpt, very nice paint, and a well amount of articulation with accessories that do add to a decent display. That said, the articulation is kind of damned because this thing was mainly designed to be in one super specific pose, then given articulation, probably like, it's almost as if NECA was planning a whole new Godzilla line with statues. Really wouldn't have minded, but I mean, hey, we got this. The accessories, the beam effects themselves aren't done really all that well, in my personal opinion, and are definitely going to be the weakest part of the figure. And there are some parts of the figure I feel like could be a little bit better sculpted or painted, and even for NECA during that time, I don't know, there's just something like this looks a bit iffy, the mouth looks a bit iffy some places, and that peg hole, like, my god, there had to have been a better way, because it literally looks like an eyeball or a butthole in the mouth. Anyway, this is definitely going to be, again, the weaker of NECA's Godzilla releases for 2016, but it's definitely going to be a lot more expansive. So in my personal opinion, I would just suggest get both of them. Resale, from what I'm looking at, ranges from about $40 to $60 on eBay before shipping. So if you find one that's not a bootleg and actually in somewhat mint condition, used condition, fair condition, has both the accessories, pick it up. It's a pretty nice of purchase. And I mean, it's that, or you shell out like $300, $400, or you try to get your kidney donated just so you can wrangle up the money to get that Monster Arts variant, Fourth Awakening version. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next review, which is going to be the final film of the NECA Godzilla review line for 2025. See you guys later. Peace out, everyone. The Hyper Maser Blast Godzilla Tokyo SOS 2003 version, which it's basically just I don't have it yet. Took me long enough. Hello everyone, welcome back to another review. My name is Matthew, and today we're back. Yes, after a long wait, we're finally taking a look at another NECA Godzilla that's not a re-review. It is a figure that is new to the collection. Not new as in like a newer released figure. Keep in mind, the NECA Godzilla line ended 5 years ago. 5 years ago. You want me to say it again just to make you feel even older? 5 years ago. Half a decade. Anyway, this is the newest figure to the collection, at least for the time being, because I do have some more on the way, but we'll get to that when we do. Anyways, this is going to be a repaint of the NECA Godzilla 2003, which, if you guys remember, was a very highly praised figure by me. I said it was one of my favorites. I still do stand by that verdict quality-wise. It's not one that I constantly return to and play around with, but it is something that I do look at and admire. That said, here we're taking that figure and making it a different version. So, with that said, is this Target exclusive, well, then Target exclusive, actually worth returning to 5 years later? Or is this thing just a remnant of the past and should stay the past? Let's find out. So just for some clarity, before we actually go on to the review itself, this guy was bought used. It has no box. There might be some scuffs here and there, but I am very pleased to say that the previous owner of this guy did a very great job at taking care of this thing, and actually did a very good job at like keeping this thing out of harm's way, which I hope to as well do the same thing. I mean, I'd be a real idiot in order to let something like that happen to this, my literal prized line. So, with that said, for accessories, the base figure basically came with nothing, and that is essentially the same thing on this guy as well. Now, You might be wondering to yourself, does it have any gimmicks because of its flashy colors? Well, when it was listed on Target, some listings on Target's website, when this thing was actually still listed this as glow in the dark. Do not actually buy into it, because this thing might look like a glow in the dark figure. I wouldn't blame you for thinking it is. However, it's not. Regardless of how much light you shine at it, even if you throw it in the sun, it's not gonna glow. Actually, if you throw it in the sun, it is gonna glow into a bright, fiery red inferno. The only mechagodzilla that ever glows in the dark, at least I think, actually does glow in the dark, is the reactor glow Godzilla. And even then, that was a Loot Crate exclusive released 2 years prior to this thing's emergence. So no, this thing does not glow in the dark. Same goes with the biollante attack, something I did fail to mention in my original reviews, but yeah, I'm mentioning it here. So, for all intents and purposes, it's not going to come with any sort of accessory. The box is not an accessory. The tip of the tail, for many years, I've said was an accessory. It's not. It's just assembly required. There's a fine difference between those two. So we can get straight into the actual figure. When taking a look at the sculpt and paint for this guy, again, it is a repaint of the previously released 2003 Goji from Tokyo SOS. So this guy is going to basically share the exact same base sculpt and paint as that guy. Same base paint job, same base sculpt, all the works. So let's go ahead and just kind of like rehash it. The eyes, very well done. I like the fact that they're simplistic yet so full of near life, because you have this big black pupil and you have the white eyeball around it, which is more like an eggshell white, to be honest, and then you have like a bit of a black outline, which gives the look like this guy's like say just wearing mascara, or maybe he's gone to some sort of concert, as well as the very nice, like nicely done brow, and then like all the different sculpted details with the dry brush over it. It's very much full of like that dry brush wash you get throughout the entire figure. The nostrils, kind of realizing that they're a bit like misaligned, like one sunk down than the other. Interesting. But you got a lot of like the nice facial sculpts and details, of which you also get the yellow on the lips here, that are like shining from where he's getting hit by the maser cannon. But of course, for the teeth, individually sculpted, bone white. Got a little bit of like gaps in between the teeth, of course, to be expected. Although this is the Toho Godzilla, which has a lot more uniform lining teeth compared to its legendary counterpart. For the upper row of like the gums here, where we have basically like the same kind of like maroon, very dark, brownish red. Same with like the tongue with like its fold and details. I do like the way the tongue looks. It's very long, slender, very angular. And again, all the teeth are individually sculpted and painted. So, going down to the bottom jaw, which I feel like we should address this. That is very much... I'm kind of torn on the yellow here. Because I understand it's kind of meant to be like, okay, he's getting hit here. The light would naturally be reflecting here. I feel like personally, though, they kind of went overboard with the yellow on the bottom jaw. Granted, it is the bottom jaw, and it does, you know, you're not going to be naturally flipping Godzilla up like this, especially if it's a paint scheme related thing where the articulation breaks the illusion. But come on, we have like all these different shades of yellow, and even get a bit of brown here, which is from the neck, but you don't use it here, so maybe you could have like used something here. I don't know. It almost looks like a jaw for an unused King Ghidorah figure. Oh, the what ifs are just flooding back. Oh boy, poor NECA. Anyway, so the ears are back with the sculpt and details. Well, the top of the head got some nice detail, which for the neck, we have more like the yellow here, which are going to be like the outer neck pieces, which are going to be kind of like very well done, which we have like the yellow tips of it, and then in between we have like the brown, which again gives it like a lot of nice like texture and detail. Again, I just love that you can rub your finger on this thing and you can feel each and every bump and crevice. And you also can get some like white here to like line up the scar, because like the scar itself begins up here, and you also get like a fair amount of white up there. For the sides of the neck, we get more like the extra yellow. And personally, I think like this works great in concept, but I don't know. I get it's supposed to like make him look like he's getting electrocuted, but something just feels off about this. I don't know what it is, but we also have the first instance of the purple here used, which for the shoulder pads, again, the purple of which kind of gets highlighted a little bit more back here, but we do kind of like have that color clashing with the yellow, so we got like a Wario and Waluigi Godzilla going on here. I can't really do a good Wario voice, so I'm gonna try. Yeah, no, I can't do it. Sorry. But yeah, here we have the dorsal plates back here, which are very rubbery. This one's a little pointy, but we have the dry brushing here as well, making a return. And of course, we have like where it kind of gets like a little bit bigger towards the back plates. Don't worry, we'll talk about that one in just a sec. But yeah, again, it just looks very uniform, very nice, and very cool. I also like how it's not the same on both sides. So that is a plus. Next, we come to the scar, which is where he's getting hit. Admittedly, I love the way that this thing looks. It's really like emphasizing the scar where it has like all the yellow and such. Sorry, like the white over the yellow and then kind of like over the brown. So it's really like if something was NECA was ever good at, it was color gradations or color gradients, really making it look like it's lighting up. And even up towards up to NECA's end of the line, which I think this is one of 2 final figures they released, this really did put that in the bag here. We also have like a bit of like, there's like a little accent of blue right here, which I gotta assume is from the back plate, of which are actually glowing. But it almost looks like some parts of it are green. And I know that's just like the base color of the figure mixing in with the paint, but it's interesting to really think about. For the shoulders, we have the, just gonna flip the hand around here, the all-encompassing yellow here. We have the brown, and then we have the bright yellow, more speckles of the white here. For the claws here, again, same base paint and colorization as the original. Bit of dry brushing here for this side. And then this side, we actually have like some purple on the nails, which is really cool. And of course, we have some of the other colors here, which are going to be primarily just yellow here on the palm. If I do take issue with one thing, is that the paint on the hinges don't like go all the way. So like here, you move the hinge back and there it kind of gets a little cut off. So you do have to kind of like realign everything. Same thing goes on this side, where again, you get more like the yellow here on the bicep, brown, back to yellow, then back to the purple and brown with the claws. You know what the purple kind of looks like? Pen ink. I know, it's very weird, but I have a history with pens and Godzillas. If you guys remember like the beams I made years ago, I miss those. I think I have like one still remaining. I still have yet to find it. Anyway, so yeah, that's that. Going back to the groin here, we have more of like the electrocution here, kind of going down with the white and the bright yellow and the darkened browns. And of course, going all the way down here to the knees, which again, it's very vein-like, but even though it's not necessarily trying to go to the veins, also just trying to show here as well, more the electric shock for Godzilla. As you can see, more goes all the way down to like the feet, which like I really wasn't expecting them to, but damn, they really pulled it off here. Again, we got more of like the brown kind of like going to the tail, which we'll talk about the tail in just a moment. But again, we got all this dry brush and the wash. Looks very well done, and I do like what we have here. Again, the purple makes a return here and here as well, kind of giving it some more highlights as well. And I like the way that the claws are painted. It kind of reminds me of the King Kong illustrated version with like its yellow. It almost feels like it's the same yellow. I wonder if it is. Anyway, it's time to talk about the dorsal plates, which, oh boy. This is definitely going to be looking a little bit weird to just some who may have not seen the movie. Like, I thought Godzilla's dorsal plates all light up, and you'd be right. But the 2002 and 2003 Godzillas do something weird because select plates illuminate before they all do, and then he fires the atomic breath. It's very weird. I suggest watching the film, but this is like in the moment where some dorsal plates are lighting up. So you have this plate, which is pretty much left alone, except for a little bit of specks, and then these two plates back here, which are not very much lighting up. I mean, actually, this one is actually very much lighting up. Sorry about that. So we have these two plates which are lighting up, and of course this big boy, which is very just... I almost would have wished they did a full-on Spitfire with this color scheme, because just look at the frosted colors mixed in with the blue. Like, this is beautiful. Okay, this is straight up beautiful. I think this is the same color scheme as they did with the NECA Godzilla 2019 V2, and everyone who's known my collection knows that that is my favorite NECA Godzilla, like, as far as the color is concerned. It's not my personal favorite as far as the actual execution of it goes. That actually goes to the 1989 Godzilla, but c'est la vie. Anyway, so we have, like, on the actual skin, more of the the blue kind of like splashing over. Looks very nice. And of course we have the blue on this dorsal plate kind of like lighting against it. So it's really creating like a lighting hue. Very much so. And then these dorsal plates don't really have anything. And then here we have these dorsal plates which are lighting up as well. And select, and then kind of like that's kind of where the plate, like the blue, ends, and then goes all the way down to the tip of the tail, where you do get the extra little sculpted paint on segments on the actual tail. And of course, just to prioritize this part here underneath the foot as well, just to briefly cover that, just like that. And yeah, that's basically it. The rest of the tail has some dry brushing. If I did have one complaint about the tail, though, it is that the paint kind of does get a little mismatched versus this one, where on the original, where the paint was a lot more uniform. So you got like this dorsal plate paint here versus this right here. So the original one did seem to get that down a bit better, but just for some last angles here. That's the side, this is the front, side again, side again, or I guess that's up, down, there you go. Anyway, for the NECA Godzilla 2003 Hypermaser Burlesque Sculpt and Paint, Sculpt is going to be absolutely awesome, because let's be real here, the 2003 Godzilla, in my personal opinion, had one of the best sculpted details in the line, because it was one of their later ones. I don't know what they were feeding their sculptors back then, to be honest, but this is awesome. And the paint is just beautiful. There is some things I do have like some personal problems with. For example, maybe like the paint alignment, because if you want like the arms themselves to be aligned as far as the paint goes, you're gonna have to have them like a bit spread out like this, and have them out to the side like that, and effectively keep him in this pose. Does it remind you of anything? Anyway, so this actually does look very nice, and I do personally like the overall presentation of it, and as well as the dorsal plates, or at least the ones that are painted the blue, as opposed to just the basic gray tips. They're beautiful. I would have loved to have seen a full like Spitfire or like charge up variants of this thing. Maybe what I would have personally done is, in an alternate universe where NECA had more time to work on this, was keep the yellow here, but take this blue, give it all the other dorsal plates on the tail, make the mouth blue, and allow him to have a beam effect. That's what I would have done, even if it meant reissuing another beam. But alas, this is the one we got, and personally, I'm still very much happy with it. It's got a little bit of everything as far as the color is concerned. So for sculpting paint, I'm going to personally rate it a 8.5 out of 10. And next up is articulation. Articulation has not changed from the original, so if you're hoping for some new engineering changes, nothing. So for the jaw, can open and closed just like that on a hinge. Just like that. The head can look up about that far, down about that far, left and right, and can go a full 360 degrees. Just like that. Now, for the neck, back then, I heckled the 2003 Goji for having this big, weird nape thing. I still don't really agree with it because effectively what NECA decided to do was in years past, let me actually grab like the closest mechagodzilla to me, which is the best example I can give, the burning Godzilla. Basically, they'd have one segment here at the neck, sorry, the head, and one segment here at the neck. So you get two joints just right here, and then you get the shoulders. That's kind of sort of what they did here, but like, it was very weird given the design. Instead of cutting the neck maybe right here, they decided this whole section where the shoulders meet, the chest, was going to be the next segment. And because of that, this whole area shifts up and down, left and right. And even if you shift it like this just looks hella awkward. Like at that point, you might as well just made the whole figure solid or did what Monster Arts did. I'm not trying to directly compare it to the Monster Arts, but have it a segment like cut midway like this. That would have looked a lot better. But of course we can go a little bit up and down, a little bit side to side, and mainly a rotation. So ultimately, what did that new segment amount to? But shockingly enough, you do still get the articulated shoulder joints, which we can go up and down, side to side. And because these parts are made of flexible rubber, you can actually get a little bit of give out of them. Swivel hinges here for the, well, elbows. Trying to like keep it all in frame here. And as well swivel hinges for the wrists. Interesting, something fell out. I'm guessing that was just let me try that again. I think that was just paint. Anyway, hinge for the fingers. Ball jointed ab crunch, so you can take the figure, go down with it if you do so please. Go up and down like that, side to side. A little bit back and forth, just like that. For the, the thighs, we can go basically out to the side, go a little bit up and down. I'm not going to push it because the paint could scrape off of this thing, and once it scrapes, well, that's kind of it. Continuing on with the legs, we have the knee joints, which we can get a bit of a rotation here, but mine are very stiff. This knee, just for the life of me, doesn't want to bend. This one also doesn't want to bend. So, well, I haven't actually tested this. This is the original 2003. Okay, so effectively they'd be like this. Just like that. Although, for the life of me, I can't do that. But we have a ball peg here for the foot. So we can get a bit of like side to side. And from here to the tip of the tail, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 segments, all ball joints. And from here to here, it's pure bendy wire. So let me try and bend this. I don't want to bend it like too badly because if I break this again, that's going to be it because I'm guarantee I cannot find another deal on this thing. So for articulation, again, nothing's really changed from the original, maybe aside from like some joint tolerance and joint tightness. But aside from that, that's realistically it. He's a very expressive Godzilla. I'll say that much. Is he perfect in terms of the engineering? No. He's serviceable where he is, and I definitely think things like the hybrid tail returning the bendy wires as well as the clamped fingers, that's a great move on NECA's part. However, things like the big nape really just don't work well. especially given this Godzilla and the fact that the paint scheme really hinders the posing options for this guy a whole lot more. I don't know, realistically, because as soon as you turn this, boom, the illusion is basically broken. And also, this guy could be prone to paint chippage. So, again, move it to your heart's content. But for articulation, I'm personally going to give it a 7.5. Very expressive, but there's really not a whole lot you can really use as far as the actual posability of this thing goes. Maybe with things like the tail, but that's really about it. And for some size comparisons, and I guess comparisons in general, here he is compared next to some 6-inch, want to make sure you can get him as tall as you can, some Kiryu gojis, or I guess Kiryu Saga gojis, with the Godzilla 2002 from Monster Arts, and the Godzilla 2003 from NECA. And as far as the repaint's concerned, again, they're effectively the same thing, aside from just the additional paint. Nothing's really different, but if I do a figure comparison, it'll most likely be with all three of these guys conjointed together. So really settle that. Who knows? And for some other size references, here he is compared next to my 6-inch Mechagodzilla Bandai bootleg and the Mechagodzilla 2001 Atomic Blast variant, which, well, it's kind of ironic that these two are kind of opposite in terms of scale. He should be about 55 meters, he should be about 60 meters. I actually bought this one to go with my Monster Arts, and he actually does fill it in, but he definitely doesn't go against the NECA. That is absolutely an unfair fight. And as for this guy, it's kind of the same idea with like the blue to the yellow. And finally, here he is compared next to the NECA Godzilla 1989 previously mentioned, and it's repainted as well as co-release, the Biollante Bio Attack, which, let's kind of sit down here and kind of talk for a sec. I personally feel like these two figures were, in a way, almost like where NECA was trying to go. It almost seemed like they didn't just want to make Spitfire variants, they wanted to make more unique variants. Because, to my knowledge, there's really not a whole lot of other figures out there of these two specific Godzillas. Because NECA is known for reusing their sculpts and repaint their figures a lot. As for these two, I really do feel like this was like, in a way, again, almost like a gateway to a future of what could have been. But it's really kind of upsetting that this is where, well, it's not upsetting, but it's upsetting in the idea that this is like where it ended as far as like them being cut short. But I think these two figures together, they're really, really cool. You have a bright neon Godzilla that's green and a flashy yellow Godzilla to accompany each other. And I think it's cool. You know, it's so weird to finally own this thing and actually have the two together at long last. But our journey in the world of Mechagodzilla isn't over. Far from over. And so overall, how do I rate this figure? Or what do I think of this figure? He's great. He's very scene specific, which makes him all the more unique. He has such a bright paint application and colorization to him. I'm actually going to turn this off just because it is making a bit of noise. But he's really cool. Granted, he's not perfect. He does have some paint imperfections. And I definitely think the articulation could have been tightened up a little bit more, especially around like the nape area. And please, for the love of God, give us an accessory. But I guess it's kind of too late to say that, isn't it? But he's so cool in the sense of like, he flashes right up on the shelf. He definitely deserves a presence within like your collection if you're really planning to collect this thing. And overall, I'm finally happy to own him. But as for the NECA Godzilla line, we're back. Yep. It's been quite a long time since I was intending to collect a NECA figure, because I did kind of put the NECA Godzilla line on the back burner for a little while. In fact, I think the only like real legit NECA Godzilla that I've gotten since the line discontinued was the 1995 Burning Godzilla. And even then, I only found him on a secondhand listing and wasn't even like intending to get him at that specific time. I just had the money and then I got him. So with that said, this is kind of like where I'm planning to continue my collection. We're going to finish up the NECA line. We're going to finish what we started. And we're going to see where we go from there, because we only have 3 more figures after this. We have the 1985, 2001 standard version, and the 2016 standard version as well. I know I own this the 2016 bootleg, but that bootleg, again, just isn't doing it for me anymore, so I want to try and track down an original. But with that said, I personally score this thing an 8 out of 10. A very solid figure indeed. So with that said, I hope you subscribe and join me on my mechagodzilla journey. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone. You know how people online are campaigning to make 2026 the new 2016? Do you guys think I may have overdone it? Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew, and today we have a monumentous video, because with us, finally, after years of being put on the sidelines, we have finally purchased and managed to acquire a legit, excuse me, an official NECA Toys Shin Godzilla action figure. Yes, so for a bit of history, this figure first came out, I want to say, if memory serves me correctly, I could be wrong about this, late 2016, 2017, around that time period. So it's been 8 or 9 years when this figure is first released. I want to say about 9 years. I remember this thing being a 2017 release. But that said, this figure has been on my radar for a very long time, especially because NECA is my personal go-to company, or at least was, until they unfortunately shut the line down in 2020 due to licensing conflicts with Legendary and Toho. Because it was licensing conflicts, they may have chose not to renew it, but they would have chose not to renew it for a specific reason, and that was most likely because of Playmates holding the master license. So, given of how much crap I know was going on with TMNT at that time, yeah. Anyway, so with that said, it all kind of, oh gosh. Don't worry, I'm not like sick or anything. I probably just caught some cat fur in my throat because we do have like 3 cats and they tend to run around the place, so it does get a bit fuzzy anyway. So yeah, this thing has been on my radar for a few years now, and finally I'm now able to own it. For the past few years, if you've been keeping up with the channel, I've been owning the bootleg Shin Godzilla, which I actually have right to me on the right hand side of your screen, which is also my screen, so thank God it's not flipped. With that said, this is, yeah, we're actually going to be taking a look at the NECA Shin Godzilla. So, with that said, is this thing worth going back to, or should we just let Monster Arts and Hiya Toys run around with the Shin license? Let's find out. For articulation, yes, we are doing the articulation first. Why? Because there are some things I want to talk about the sculpt and paint section, which might take up a large majority of the video because I do have some interesting things to say about that. So, let's start with the articulation here. For the jaw, it does open and close on a hinge. Let's try to get it in a position where we can. There we go. So it can open and close. It does kind of go a little far, but it does kind of like stop with the membrane. So open to your heart's content. For the head, for the head solo, we can look up about that far, down about this far. It is on a barbell style peg. To pretty much like recount what a barbell style peg is, it's mainly supposed to be like a singular stick. Like, pretend my finger's the stick, and there's 2 ball joints on each side. So, effectively, they go in 2 sockets, and that allows you to get a maximum range of movement. So, a lot of the joints on this figure are going to be made of that barbell-style ball joint, so you're going to be seeing that a lot. As well as, it can also go side to side and rotate quite a bit. Just trying to readjust the head. For the neck, we can go down actually very far, back up more or less here to the left and to the right, and can rotate. So you can see that. The shoulders can go back and forth and swivel up and down. And it can also slightly rotate. It's very stiff because of the size. Here for the shoulder, or the elbow, sorry, we have a hinge, so we can go back and forth and rotate. Swivel hinges for the wrists. This was, I think, I could be wrong about this, but this was the first instance of a swivel hinge on a NECA Godzilla for the wrist. So, again, I could be wrong about that, but at least, like, release order wise. For the waist, we actually do get a bit of, like, rotation here. Not so much up and down, but we do get a bit of, like, side to side. So, it's a bit more flexible than that of, like, the 84, but not by much, I'd say. For the hips, Shin had big hips that didn't really move, so you don't get like a whole lot of like to the side motion, but you do get a very nice rotation here at the leg, which allows you to go full 360 degrees. For the knees, we can go in about that far, bend in like this about that far, and can rotate a bit. For the foot, we have a ball joint here for the wrist, for the breast, the ankle, or the shin, ching, and can rotate all mounts. Trying to get it back into a good, serviceable position. And for the tail, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ball joints that all move in unison with each other. And from here to here is a metal wire. However, given the age of this thing and how rare and delicate it is, I am not going to be using that because I don't trust that. And it's also why I want to talk about the sculpt in the next segment, which will also be grading alongside the articulation, because I feel like in this special case, they really go hand in hand. But if you want my general consensus on the articulation, I think that the articulation here is, well, for some part of it, serviceable. It has just about the same amount of articulation points as all previous NECA Godzillas did, having X amount in the tail, a bendable wire, ankle joints, knee joints, foot joint, waist, arm, elbow, wrist, one neck, one head, and a jaw. So effectively, it has all the right articulation points. However, I don't believe you're able to use a lot of it, which will segue into sculpt and paint just a minute. But a big problem with the NECA Shin Godzilla is that it seems to have been designed with a pre-posed look. And that's especially evident when you look at things like the tail and the head. See, the original prototype for this guy had a much larger head, which it was this mold specifically, but it was a bit bigger than this. And it was revealed at Comic-Con, I think. Toy Fair or Comic-Con, one of the two. And much like the 84, there was a bit of like backlash from various collectors around that time, so they shrunk down the head as a form of constructive criticism, thinking that it'd be okay. Little did NECA know that only caused more problems, because I don't think that because of the head size, it looked proportionally enough to the neck as far as like this top dorsal fin goes. However, it seems that the head, when posed up, it doesn't look right. You see what I'm saying? Because Shin Godzilla doesn't really move his head in the film. Okay, what a big babu. What's the problem here? Well, by having his head like this, it looks weird. Like the spine, there's no transition from like a smaller spine in between. I know the actual Shin Godzilla design was kind of like that, but if you'll excuse me for 1 minute. Here with me, I have the Blu-ray of Shin Godzilla, which was actually just released last year. And you can see what I mean by this is the head is big, but it's because of the size would be proportionally accurate to this top dorsal fin, which in retrospect would be this. There isn't another dorsal fin here, but it at least has a bit of like a stop to where it would look natural, and then the spines would start kicking in, if that makes any sort of sense. But even like when you have the head down on the NECA, or at least the final result, I'm gonna angle my camera up here a little bit, it doesn't really seem to have that. Well, at least in certain poses. because when it's down like this, it looks fine, at least for the most part. When you have it like this, it just doesn't look that good. Another case in point is going to be, moving my Shin Godzilla Blu-ray, is going to be the tail. The tail was sculpted at a curved angle. Now, it is true that it's technically Shin Godzilla's basic pose or render in the film, where he has his tail kind of like down like a normal Godzilla. Then starting at this section, it goes up, curls a little down, and then swirls back up to the very skeletal, meaty, flesh-style part. I'm trying to get that to focus, but it's focusing on the background stuff. There you go. You're here to see the NECA Shin Godzilla, aren't you? And while it is cool that they kept that attention to detail, the articulation suffers from it because aside from this pose and maybe getting it to curl to the sides a little bit, there's really not a lot you can do with the tail, because if you try straightening it out, it's just going to look like this. The wire isn't going to help you because it's automatically curled straight down, because the ball peg down here, I'm going to try and pop it off just so I can show you guys. Right here, it's at an angle. Now, again, it's like that on Shin's design. I'm willing to admit that and credit that. They kept that attention to detail. But when it comes to making an articulated action figure, I don't think that's how you're supposed to do it. A pre-posed action figure, then you make cuts out of it and expect people to move it, that's not necessarily the best design. In my personal opinion, they should have just done a straight series of ball joints with the mold, not in a prefixed position, and allowed people to pose the tail in this way, not have it like this from the get-go. So overall, things like the torso and the legs and the arms don't really have much complaints. However, it's just things like the head and the tail, yeah, they obviously are pre-posed. So for articulation, while it's not bad, it's just about average for mechagodzilla. The pre-posed sculpt doesn't really help it at all. So I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10 for the articulation. Up next is sculpt and paint, and finally we can take a look at the main meat and gravy of the video, quite literally, because this thing looks like it is essentially just gravy covered in a bunch of red. Anyway, so for the actual mold, the head sculpt on Shin here looks actually pretty nice for what we got. Is it 100% accurate? No, because I don't think NECA had access to the CG files or model for Shin Godzilla at the time, because remember, this was underneath Wonder Brothers, who was basically like the communicator for NECA at the time, because they had to go through WB, and then they had to go through Toho, and then basically WB was like at the center of it all. So anyway, so for the mold, it is very mushy, as Shin Godzilla tends to be. A lot of the bumps and crevices are very exaggerated, obviously, you know, from the actual design. Not trying to like fault NECA on that. They did a really nice job at capturing that. And in fact, they went a step further by giving him the beady little eyes that Shin has, as well as the blood red accents throughout his body that really cover him and just look really gross. And it looks very, it looks very wounded. And the teeth actually are very well sculpted and painted. Like, I'm impressed. Even for NECA's heyday at the time, this was really well done. Also, by the way, it was just worth noting that this is the original release, not the boxed version. I can tell because after looking photos of the boxed version and this, yeah, this is clearly the first run. Anywho, and even for like the jaw here, this looks very well painted, very gross again. It very much captures Shin Godzilla's like overall aesthetic. However, I do have a personal problem with the mouth, and that comes in when we open up his jaw. See, in the mouth, Shin Godzilla had a very particular jaw with membranes at the sides and no tongue. It was very spacious in there, and I'm trying to like, this will be the way I'm showing it. Sorry, folks. But my biggest problem with the mouth here on this Shin Godzilla is that I feel like they really botched this. What I mean by that is the throat itself, well, specifically like the mouth hole, it isn't. This is gonna sound so weird, but if you want to be technical with the actual movie design, it's not that big. It's not big enough to actually like be what was on screen. And I feel like part of that is because the membranes are too pushed back in and too thick. What I mean by that is we basically have like two sets of membranes here. We have this and then like the interior piece. Like, like you can see two pieces that are attached to the top part of the jaw. And then when you move it, you see the two pieces on the side, which make up the membranes on the other end of the jaw. Because of that, it leaves the throat hole like way too small, and it just doesn't look right. I feel like that's one advantage that the Monster Arts has over the NECA, but to be fair, again, that's probably just because of the way the articulation was engineered. But come on, I feel like there had to have been a more interesting way to do the mouth, like, cause like this, I feel like if the membranes were more towards like actually aligning more with the teeth, and that would have maybe allowed more clearance for the throat itself, that would have looked better. It is also worth noting that the side of my membrane is a bit chipped. I'm not sure if that was from the previous seller, that's just a paint defect. I'll probably never know, but anyways, because I did get this thing used. Anywho, so for the actual spines here, well, specifically like the top few spines, they look really nice. And even like the body has like a different shade of red, almost like an orange, which really adds to the overall color aesthetic of Shin Godzilla. It's very evened out, and I would even go as far to say it probably looks better than like a lot of other Shin Godzilla action figures that I currently know of, because I know about the Bandai vinyls and the Monster Arts figures and this, as well as the Atomic Blast version, and in my personal opinion, this thing just looks incredible. There's stuff in the crevices, outside of the crevices. It looks very uneven out, but yet so even at the same time, like across the whole body. So with that said, you also get some on the gills, some various marks on the shoulders and such, and even like the glowing effects for like the dorsal plates, which we'll talk about in a bit, but they just look stellar. Moving down here to the torso, we have more or less the same thing where we're getting a lot of like the nice kind of web detail, and the claw paint looks pretty nice too, actually having a bit of detail work, which is surprising given the size of them. You do get a bit of shading too and a little bit of gloss. We have all the folds in the skin, looks very meaty and very chunky. Gets a lot of like the bumps and the crevices in the skin, just kind of like put it towards one side here. You see all the asymmetricalness because we have one spike back here for the thigh, and then this side doesn't really have that. It has like a bump, but not like a spike like back here. As well as the chest spike, that thing looks incredible too. Get some paint in the collarbone as well. We do have more of the orange, kind of red paint towards the sides here. Kind of noticing a bit of a color difference. Like there's some yellowish accents, so that's interesting. Just really trying to give you guys like a really nice look at this thing. The feet kind of stop that. I don't remember if the feet in the film actually had the red crevices. They probably did. But as we can see with the claws, they look really nice with the shading. I will say this one has a bit more like shading than this one does, but they still look really nice nonetheless. Some copyright info. Yeah, this thing was made in 2017. Just wanted to double confirm. So as you can see, yeah, this is when they were still under WB. And let's talk about the dorsal fins. Just now, I am like aware that the dorsal fins might be a bit too like thickened out, but I guess that's only because like in the film that they were pretty thin fins. They weren't small fins, they were pretty thinned out. So NECA just decided to puff them up a little bit, make them almost like the 1968 Bandai vinyl, not literally but figuratively. And the red just looks, I'll say this, maybe a bit heavy-handed, but they look really nice. Because for the base, we have the orange kind of coloring, and then as it goes on, we have a bit more of a red, which orange is typically brighter than red. So you do get a bit of a color gradient with the dorsal plates here. Also, they are made of a more rubber feeling, so you don't have to worry about hurting yourself when you handle the figure. And it looks very nice and very natural. And now we come to the tail, which, again, like the red just seeps through. I will say that there's a bit of like a transition where it kind of gets a lot of it and then kind of fades out until you get to like the skeletal end. But you just see all like the amount of detail with this tail. Detail, da-dom-ching. 2 da-dom-chings in one video, and I guess that was a third. But to just show the dorsal plates here, they look absolutely phenomenal. Just straight up amazing. And even see where the black spines are painted as well as the red. Like, they keep the glowing effect really well. And then we come to the actual tail, well, skeletal end of the face, well, the tail. Here's a little context for those that haven't seen Shin Godzilla. The tail itself is comprised of a bunch of other organisms within Godzilla himself. So, essentially this thing is a secondary Godzilla growing out of Shin's tail. And in the movie design, there is something that looks like a second face. The figure does not have this. In fact, the only remnant of the tail face that it has is this little tiny nub that kind of looks like the head, but there's really nothing there. Also, it does have those infamous like Cheeto chunks, which like I'm not exactly sure what those are supposed to be. Like, are those supposed to be bone? But the bone isn't painted white, it's painted black. So what even is this? I have no clue. I'm just gonna question the paintwork at NECA for that, but aside from that, even though we're taking this all into account, the sculpt work is very well done, and I'm vastly surprised at how well this sculpt turned out. For articulation, maybe not the best, but for like an actual Shin Godzilla design, this is very well done. That said, my only real cons would be maybe the mouth, definitely, and the Cheeto chunks on the tail tip. So really, that's kind of about it. So I'm gonna go ahead and say I rate this thing an 8.5 out of 10 in terms of sculpt and paint. Very nice. And just for a brief size comparison, here he is compared next to some other Shin Godzilla figures, ironically using the NECA mold, with the Playmates Shin Godzilla V1 and V2, original release and re-release. And yeah, there's no competition. The NECA slams both of them. And for another size comparison, here he is with another flurry of Shin Godzilla figures. I'm going to be doing all of them with the Bandai Movie Monsters original and bootleg versions. And as for which one I prefer of these two, I would say mold and accuracy wise, definitely the Bandai one. But for overall quality, I'm just going to go with the NECA. It just looks better. And here he is compared next to some other NECA figures with the NECA 54 and NECA Burning Godzilla. And finally, for the comparison you guys have probably been wanting to see, here he is compared next to his original brethren, the NECA Shin Godzilla Atomic Blast variant, and the bootleg version of the NECA Shin Godzilla, which, ignoring him for a sec, because we'll talk about it in just a sec, I would say, in all honesty, as per the execution of both figures, the original beats the Atomic Blast variant. I'm going to mainly just say that there are several things I don't like about the Atomic Blast variant, that because that this original version, oh crap, you know what, the beam's going to fall out anyway. The original one doesn't have, for example, the paint sporadic problems, like it, for some paint like there's way too much, and for things like the thigh up here, there's way too little. This version nails it. There's pretty much like no area where it doesn't have red paint, say, except for the feet. So in my personal opinion, I do enjoy the original variant more. However, that also comes to say, what about him? Well, I'm going to be doing a video where I compare the original and the bootleg variant of NECA Shin Godzillas, because there are a lot of things I like to say about both of them, and just so you can make sure that you don't accidentally buy a bootleg Shin Godzilla, because trust me, there's probably thousands of people out there who've fallen victim to buying this instead getting this, or something like it. And so overall, for the NECA Shin Godzilla, what do I think of this guy? He is phenomenal. Well, at least in the sculpt and paint section. Because, let me put it this way. This guy is honestly, I would say, a well-balanced figure, all things considered. Does he have articulation problems? Yes. Does he have skeleton pain problems? Yes. And they're mainly caused by each other. That said, it still looks like Shin Godzilla. It functions like a Shin Godzilla action figure should. And in my personal opinion, it is the best scaled one you can currently buy because the monster arts, like it or not, is too big, all things considered. Even if it was the biggest, baddest Godzilla at the time, by that logic, their Godzilla Earth should have been 3 times that size. Yet I don't see them cranking out any Godzilla Earth figures that are about this. So, no. There's no excuse that Shin Godzilla figure, that the monster art Shin should have been that big. But I digress. Back to the NECA shit. Do I recommend him in 2025? Or 6, sorry. I know I'm kind of living in the past. I'm used to saying that. What am I? I would say yes. Why? Because let's assume that this figure's resale value is about $50 to $60. I got it about that price, and you can probably too. This thing is relatively the cheapest Shin Godzilla figure on the market. Excluding the Bandai vinyls and only counting plastic highly articulated action figures, that's pretty much the truth. Because the Monster Arts one is still relatively expensive despite all the numerous versions they're putting out. They're even putting out a new version, the fourth like Awakening Shin in like a new movie graphics plus line or something. They're basically stripping of all of its accessories, including like a dinky, crappy little postcard with it. Really? That's your comeback with Shin? Not even like the standard version, by the way. And in terms of like the price, that's still like well over $120 or at best. So for half of that, you can get this. Now, as per the, also by the way, Hiya Toys still hasn't made articulated Shin Godzilla as of this recording, and hopefully not by this posting, because watches like next time watches I'm posting this, and they immediately announce boom, Hiya Toys Shin Godzilla. Anyway, and no one's getting that Super 7. I'm sorry, that thing looks horrible. Anywho, so that's why I recommend buying. Where do you go to buy this? I would recommend secondhand stores like eBay, where I got this guy from. So eBay, trying to name Mersari. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Facebook Marketplace. Those are the 3 sites I'd recommend finding this from. That said, if you want to know how to find a good listing, and this one being sure it's legit, look at the seller reviews, look at the images. Like, make sure you Google search for it, and look at the actual, like, just look at the listing. Because chances are, if it looks like this, it's the real thing. The bootleg version is a lot more duller and a lot sloppier, and doesn't have the same build quality as this one does. So that's how to find it. Go to a secondhand store, set your budget at maybe 50, 60, 70 tops, not counting shipping, so counting shipping I'd say, and you should be running home free. That said, I rate this thing an overall 8 out of 10. So with that said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe. We have one last NECA figure to look at after this, and then after that, that's done. It already came in by the time I'm recording this, but I honestly don't believe it. We're almost at the end. So again, thank you for supporting me, and like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone.
Hello everyone, welcome to my review on the NECA 2014 Godzilla figure. This is a figure that I absolutely love. So, for detailing...
Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew, and today we have made it. The end of the NECA Godzilla line on the channel. Let's shed a little bit of light. For a little bit of history, I guess, for lack of a better term, for the past 10 years, over so, It was Christmas of 2015 that kickstarted my entire Godzilla collecting journey and has basically shaped me into the person who I am now. I am obsessed with this frickin' lizard and have been for over the past 11 and coming on 12 years. That said, the NECA Godzilla line was the thing that started it all and was the thing that had pretty much not only provided me with hours of nostalgia, but also the line that has been with me through it all. My very first figures were the 1954 and the NES Godzilla. And then eventually got the 94 and the 2014. Took a little bit of a break, went back to NECA, took a little bit of a break, went back to NECA. And every new release I was anticipated for, knew of, and eventually got at some point in time. But after they lost the license, unfortunately I went a bit of a detour after I got the 89 biollante Godzilla. And went a little bit of a route, Playmates, that big guy. But eventually I gained the courage to return to the world of NECA Godzillas last year and vowed to collect the last four, which were the Hyper Maser Blast, the 85, the 2016 Shin, and the 2001 GMK. And now we're here. The last of the core four that we were missing through all those years, and it's finally here in review form. But that's just my personal connection with the line. We'll talk about that in a future video more so, as if it already hasn't been addressed. Anyway, so yes, the final NECA Godzilla 6-inch figure is officially here. And with that comes with a whole sorts of different things, like the GMK Hiya Toys one just came out recently, not that long ago. And it might be a little weird for me to go back to actually get this one, but again, I'm just picking up what I left off, and this is the last one I need. So with that said, is this guy worth going back to? Is he a great figure even after all these years? Or should he just remain a figment of the past? Let's find out. So seeing as how this was one of NECA's earlier releases, well, I guess to technically put it precisely, this would be the more like early to mid release of sense, because while this was NECA's earlier Gojis, this was like when they were at least a few years into the Godzilla line, so at this point they had the skills necessary to make some cool Godzilla figures. I mean, they already made some cool figures right off the hop. So this is going to be, obviously, for a little bit of context, based on the 2001 movie, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters, All-Out Attack. As for my opinion on the movie, I think it's actually a really cool, unique take, because it kind of like flips the scales, quite literally scales here, and gives Godzilla a whole new, like, display of raw power, and actually brings back Baragon. Was supposed to bring back Anguirus and Varan, but instead Toho replaced him with Mothra and King Ghidorah and made King Ghidorah the good guy, which I was really surprised to see. Which I think it's the only time in the series where they made Ghidorah the good guy? I don't know. But in that sense, let's go ahead and talk about the sculpt and paint, because noteworthy, this guy does not come with any accessories, unlike his Spitfire counterpart. Now, for the actual sculpting and paint, the obvious thing that would jut out at you first glance is going to be the abundance of green here, which I remember from earlier, like, promo pics this guy did have a bit of green, but I feel like the figure definitely has a lot more green than what would be shown on the actual promo pics. But for the eyes here, they're entirely glossed out with white, and they look really good. They give the nice pissed off looking expression that GMK is known for having, and it looks really nice. For the actual mold here, we have a really nice semblance of things like the scales looking really nice. The snarl here looks really cool. The nose here looks really well done, as well as the scales back here, all detailed. Essentially, it has a nice green wash to everything. And I'll say this, green might not be the most appropriate usage of the GMK design. But my only guess as to why they would include the green is because NECA did kind of utilize green in a lot of their earlier Godzillas, because 2014 had a green wash, 94 had a primarily green wash, 84 had a somewhat blue wash, same with 54. So it seems like NECA really wanted to go for the greens and blues on their early releases. Imagine what the 62 Goji would have looked like with like green or blue wash. Interesting. Anyway, so for the continuing with the actual design here for the mouth, the teeth are individually sculpted and painted with a little bit of a gray. So I'm colorblind apparently. Like a kind of like a peach color, very bone color. I don't know. It looks very dirty. Of course, the gums here look really nice, and of course the wash looks really just incredible. We have the peg hole actually from the Spitfire edition, which I guess is actually from this one. I guess they were planning a heat ray version with this thing all along. Interesting. But for the tongue here, has a nice little itty bitty sculpt, and of course the squared off jaw, which looks very nice, and actually has a lot more detail work and like washed dirty. In fact, you're gonna have to forgive the fur. I have 3 cats, so it's bound to happen. One of them actually was just standing up here before I started rolling, so some of it did make its way onto the tongue, which kind of looks like he ate something he shouldn't have, but knowing this Godzilla, he probably does not give a crap of what he eats. Anyway, you see the ears, they look nice. And for the bottom of the jaw, which is noteworthy because you might notice that it's all in pink. And I have to ask why. Because part of me doesn't understand why they would go from a green to a pink. Like, I guess that maybe it could be because it's maybe bleeding through. Like, maybe the base color of the plastic is a pink, which would explain the jaw or the gums. But this is like this on all units that I've seen. And even the reissue, which actually has a worse paint job than this one, it's interesting. Which I should also clarify, this is the original release, not the poster box reissue. So there is that worth pointing out. What's also noteworthy is going to be the way the rest of the body is done, because it seems like they held a lot of the green here for the head and didn't really give it towards the rest of the body here, which does have a bit of green, but it's not as like predominant as the head here. Another thing to point out is going to be that nasty snarl that they gave GMK here, because in the film, Godzilla here does like to snarl, and there's even like that one render of him like really just giving the snarl, which I have to wonder if this figure was based on that original like render. But that said, it does look really cool. I really like it on this side because it looks a bit more angular. Like the teeth, like the gum here looks kind of like more basic on this side, and then they have a little bit more shown here, versus this one where it's primarily like a little less dominant, but it still has the snarl. Anyway, down to the neck, because we're spending way too much time on the head. Here we have the individual like little flaps of skin here for the neck. They look nice, little wavy patterns, scale bits by bits. And the 3 rows of fins with a little bit more fins like kind of jutting out as you go. And of course it shows off the green as per usual, which looks, I'll admit, I don't think green is the right choice for GMK Godzilla, but I do like the execution of the green if it was like this throughout the whole figure. However, I also believe that if it was more like this, then I think it'd look a little bit more consistent, which I do like consistency in my figures, and sadly this figure does not seem to deliver that, at least when it comes to the head versus the rest of the body. For the rest of the body here, for the torso, we have the more like, what shape is that? Like, oh, frick, I don't know my shapes. I run an animated show with shapes. What am I saying? More kind of like squared off, kind of like varying consistency shape of scales here, which look really nice. And we have like little pecs there, little folds in the skin. Of course, we have more bit down here, and it shows off that green, which I kind of have like mixed feelings about, because again, the green might not be necessarily the best choice for the GMK Godzilla. For the arms here, we have a lot of the nice wash here, which goes all the way down to the wrists. You can see, just kind of giving off that more wavy pattern here. Of course, the black as its base. Something worth pointing out is going to be the claws here are going to be painted like a mixture of different whites. So you have like the base white and then a couple that. My cat's trying to jump up here. No, kitty. No, no, kitty, no, no. I'm gonna put up something to kind of like distract her. Big goji. Anyway, so the claws here do have some pretty nice detailing here with the nice variety of color schemes. Here for the fingernails, again, more like the whites and the peaches. It's not primarily like the Spitfire version where it's just more uniform. They actually have a bit of color gradation. And what's also funny is that mine came with a defect because essentially the pieces of the arm here, the thumb and the palm itself, those are on the right hand. But the finger segments are actually the same. They're both Godzilla's right hand, from his perspective, on the left and right hand. Like, you can see, because that's supposed to be his pinky, middle finger, and index finger. That's how it's supposed to look. That's not. So now it just looks like he has a very small pointer finger. Am I going to replace this guy? No. I already waited too long to get this thing, and I'm really not in the mood to, like, replace my figures right now. That said, I definitely have to replace some of them. Mothra 2019, Kong Skull Island, Deserve Conquest Jungle, Godzilla 94. Anyway, so for the sides, very chunky and very nice indeed with the more sculpted details, as well as mixed with the green paint apps. Because at least here for the sides of the body, they did the green in a way that doesn't look overly barren to look at, or barren, boom ching. For the dorsal plates, let's actually kind of get rid of some of the glare here. Okay, that just made things way worse, but hey, at least you can still see it. These things just look beautiful. I'm just gonna say it. They look very ghost-like, and I like that about them. I remember there's this one shot in the movie that, like, with the GMK's dorsal plates just lighting up, like, just a pure apparition. And I guess it was the closest thing we got to that Godzilla versus Ghost Godzilla pitch, which I think was supposed to be for versus Destoroyah. I could be wrong about that. I don't know. I heard about something like that years ago. Anywho. So for the dorsal plates, they are going to be made of like a soft plastic, as per usual NECA gojis are. And they look really nice. You have a bit of like a gray to a very thick yellow, white fade. I don't know why I said yellow. But they just look great. If I did have one complaint, it's that the strips are painted the same color, so they kind of look weird. Also, these four fins down here, those are also painted, but we're going to talk about the dorsal plates back there on the tail in just a minute. For the thighs here, very folded in the skin, crevices in the detail. They look really nice with the green. All washed up and everything. Not like washed up in the sense of, oh, he's washed up. No, I mean like washed up as in like a ton of the green wash here, like really washing it up, and I like that. The kneecaps look very big and bold, as per usual, and the kind of like the lower knee shin areas look really nice as well. I will say maybe the feet look a little too big. I mean, then again, GMK did have relatively big proportioned feet, but something just looks a little too thickened. Like, I'm really trying to figure out what it is. My only guess is that maybe it's a bit too high off the ground, so it almost looks like he's wearing some sort of shoes. But with that said, the claws here have that white to kind of like peach, brown, dirty color scheme, which, I mean, if you don't like it, that's fine. I don't mind it, relatively speaking. I have no idea what's going on here, where they just didn't paint like a certain section of the nail, but copyright info, Toho, trademark limited. When was this thing made again? 2016. So this would have been, we're literally bringing back 2016 for 2026. So you can't really do that any more than this. So, and anyways, with the tail ending it all off, we have the dorsal plates here, which are going to be painted the white. And then it kind of goes back to that green, which really showcases it in full, especially when you get to the more tail end of the tip of the tail end. A-ba-doom ching. I'm full of puns today, aren't I? Anyway, more or less the dry brushing is more held back towards the tip because the base of it doesn't really have much to work with here. So you can see it pretty much predominantly at one certain section. Looks really nice. Nothing too much to write home about when it comes to the overall shape of the tail, but it does look really cool. Anyways, for the actual angles of the figure, let's go ahead and do this. Side shot, front shot, this side shot, underneath, and top. I guess, and also back. Let the jokes ensue. Anyway, so for the sculpt and paint, accurate. I mean, you can tell it's the GMK Godzilla, but it's not necessarily 100% accurate in the sense of that this thing is one-to-one with the movie, because it's not. But for what you do get here and how old this figure is, accounting for both, I really dig it. It's nothing like overly complex. It's fairly standard for a NECA figure. And I do like what we have here. That said, I do think that there are some drawbacks. For example, the head color scheme to the body is one. The pink jaw I'm not really understanding. And I think that the strips on the back do kind of look a little iffy. Am I going to add a con for the mismatch of fingers? You know what? Just because it is a defect, yes. So, I mean, presentation-wise, this thing is still really good. So I'm going to give this thing a final score, well, sculpt and paint-wise, of 7.5 out of 10. Now is sculpt and paint. Sorry about articulation, I'm an idiot. I'm getting a lot of things wrong today, aren't I? Anyway, I haven't been 100% in the head, we'll say, recently. Anyway, that's just one way of saying I'm an idiot. Anywho, so how well does this thing pose? Well, if you're an OG channel viewer and saw the original Atomic Blast Godzilla review from all those years ago, or even just the original remastered for 2025, you would have already seen it and you already know it. But for those who are just brand spanking new, out of the oven new, let's go ahead and talk about it. So, for the jaw, hinges open and closes. So it can hinge open like that and down like that. If I did have a bit of a complaint, it's that mine is a little loose, although that could just be because I did get this thing used. But another thing to worth pointing out is that I don't think that the figure was designed with the intention of actually like opening his mouth open, like while he's doing the snarl. Because if you look at it like this just looks off. Like his teeth are kind of like at an angle like this, and his jaw is just like right here. Now, ideally, they should have done something like the 54. Let me bring him down. The 1954 Goji had the hinge more towards the back as opposed to lining up with the top of the jaw, and had the joint sinking down so it looked more authentic, like an actual jaw to a mouth. And that's why it looks like this. It looks fluid. It looks good. Here, it just doesn't look well. I mean, as far as the teeth are concerned, both do a really cool job at like lining up the teeth. But it's just when you do that, it doesn't really look, we'll say, the best. But putting Mr. Godzilla off to the side here, let's bring this back around. For the head, we can look up about this far, down about this far, and left, right, and pretty much go a full 360 degrees. For the neck, we can go down, up, and go a full 360 degrees. And using the two head joints together, we can go down and up, as well as left and right. It is still decently stiff. I don't imagine that the person who owned this thing prior to me had any sort of intentions of like going completely ham on this thing. Shoulders can go out to the side like that. can go in pretty much a full 360 degrees. Elbow hinge, which can go, well, let me push it down. In like that, out like that, twist like that. Pretty much go a full 360. Don't mind the background noise, that's just the cats. 360 for the ball joints here. And I can go a little up and down. And as per mentioned, the swivel hinge for the fingers, so you can make it look like he's grabbing something, or like, well, how much of that did I get on camera? I'm not even viewing my camera screen. So just to recap, elbow, wrist, fingers here for the hinge, hinge for the fingers. They also do work on the other side, but they are a little stiff because of the way that they are placed. Waist, you can get a little bit of a rocker, side to side, up and down, but it's primarily going to be a rotation. So you can spin that freely as much as you want. Thighs, don't like quote me of this, but the thighs are really good because they can spread out like this. Probably one of the only times I'm going to be able to say someone's thighs are good because they can spread anyway. But they can spread out to the side very far like this. They can come in. They can do a, can they do a full 360? I haven't tried a 360 on a mechagodzilla 2001 sculpt in a while. I think just for safekeeping, I'm going to go and say no, because it doesn't look like there's that much clearance to fit a leg that far like the 94 is. Hinge for the knees here. So you can bend and swivel like that. And 360 for the ankle. As well as a side to side. And one very stiff 1, 2, 3, 4 ball joints here for the tail. My thumb on the left is getting a little sore. So we can go just like that. Just like this. Go up like this. And straighten out. Now, from here to here, it's going to be pure wire. And you can actually take this, well, out of the package, it's going to be disassembled. So literally just, if you're having difficulties, use a blow dryer or dip this thing in hot water. Don't leave it in for too long because it'll start to warp the plastic. That said, it's a wire, so you can like bend it and etch what you want. I'm not going to show it because I am scared of the structural integrity of this thing nearly 10 years later. But with that said, it is worth noting that the reissue does have some differences when it comes to the overall details. I want to say that this turned into a swivel hinge. I could be wrong. I'd have to fact check that. And this is actually kind of cool, is that they got rid of this ball joint segment and instead made this whole piece, the bendy wire, which is interesting because you think they would get rid of the bendy wire tail, but no. But with that said, for articulation, he is fairly average. There is one major flaw with this figure, and you can kind of start to notice it. If you haven't noticed it, allow me to place the 54 one right beside him. It's not the jaw, it's the posture. And the big problem with the posture is that the GMK Godzilla was mainly designed to be in a hunched stance, and there's really no way to get him to look upright. In fact, if you try and do that, the closest he can really get to it is about like this. And even so, he still has a very awkward hunch with a very curled back neck and a very front forward face lean. Now, admittedly, yes, GMK had a hunch to him, but I don't think it was this jarring. And in fact, that's ultimately this figure's biggest weakness, is that similar to Shin Godzilla, it was designed in one specific stance and meant to be in one specific stance. I think that NECA really should have reconsidered that and made him more of a neutral, upright Godzilla like this than a hunchback like this. Anyway, for what it's worth, you can get some pretty decent poses out of this thing, but don't expect him to look up at maybe a flying ghidorah or a flying mothra or a flying baragon. Yes, a flying baragon, implying that he sent him flying like he did in the freaking movie. Or just anything that involves him rearing up. Essentially, if up is what you're looking for, don't even look at this thing. Go with the monsters or Haya. But that said, on his own, he still looks really cool and does do a lot of cool poses and has some to potentially pose off some really cool, well, poses. I should probably start saying that. Anyway, I'm going to rate this thing a 7 out of 10. Fairly average for a mechagodzilla, but I definitely think that the hunchback and the jaw are kind of overlooked. And just for some brief size comparisons, just because I had both of them on the shelf, here, or I guess on the table here he is compared next to a bootleg Imperial Godzilla that I got from X amount of years ago, really having a brain fart on that, and the NECA Godzilla 1954, which is, assuming that you actually have watched both films, these are technically the same character. And for another size comparison, here he is compared next to some other GMK Godzillas in my collection, with the NECA Spitfire edition. I have to put this Godzilla back up again because now my cat Piper's back. The NECA Spitfire Godzilla from 2001, and the SH Monsters Godzilla 2001 original release, because I know that there's a Spitfire edition of this guy, but given the fact I already have this one and his Spitfire version doesn't even come with an actual atomic blast effect, there's really no point to that one. Anywho, just to kind of briefly showcase here what I meant by the color scheme difference is that they really seem to have maybe listened to the criticism a little bit, because things like the claws here, they're a lot more grayed on this one than there are here, and the green has basically been abolished and replaced with a nice blueberry burst of blue. And also, for those wondering, yes, the beam effect can fit into this guy's mouth. This is a bit tricky, but it can be done. What's funny is that because I've had this guy for so long, the beam has basically warped this guy's mouth, so at the point where it doesn't even really fit anymore. Meanwhile, this is actually kind of a snug fit. So, hold on. Let's kind of get this guy's beam out. Don't want to, ruin him already. So, yeah, there you go. And as for the SH Monsters version, I'll be doing a more in-depth comparison sometime in the near future, but, you might be surprised by my thoughts. And just for some exercise comparisons with some Bandai America figures, vinyls, whatever you want to say, here he is compared next to the GMK Ghidorah and the Bandai America Godzilla 2000, which, yeah, these two are on a scale, and you absolutely bet I'm going to be displaying them together, primarily just because they are both of the same movie, so there's that. And finally, here he is compared next to the final 4 NECA Godzillas I needed to complete the collection, with Shin Godzilla GMK himself, 85, and 2003 Hyper Mazer Blast Edition. Oh, does it feel bittersweet to finally own these. And for the final review of NECA Godzillas on the channel, it's pretty good. It's nothing mind-blowing. It's definitely a serviceable GMK, and one at least worth remembering or looking back to. Are there better figures than this on the market? If the Haya Toys is anything to go off by, then yes. I will admit personally that I'm kind of glad I got this thing now, because I probably would have destroyed this thing when I was younger, because I was still learning the basics of what it means to be a collector. And at that point, this thing probably would have suffered a fate much like the 94 did. If you don't know, I glued my 94 head before the nail polish trick I learned about. But that said, this thing is really good. It has a really nice sculpted details to it. The green paint, while questionable, at least offers some colorful gradations with the figure. It's just the head I'm not really a fan of. And the articulation is serviceable for what you do get, and allows you to pull off some decent poses like this, just allowing to lumber around and look at you dead on in the eye without actually having eyes himself. But overall, this is a wonderful way to send off the line, in my opinion, on the channel. Now, let's get something clear. NECA Godzillas are always going to be on the channel. They're what started my collection. Some of my earliest videos, if you go back, literally hit the oldest option, my first 4 figure reviews were the NECA Godzilla lines. The 2014, 94, 85, or 88 NES, and the, not 54. Yeah, 54, 94, NES, and 2014. Those were the first 4. And now we're ending it off with another 4. I think that is the perfect way to cap off the NECA line as far as new reviews go. Because now, as of this year, all the NECA Godzillas have been reviewed. Every one of them. Now, I know technically we did Matthew 2000 back in 2022. But on that note, is the review done? Yes, I rate this thing at a final score of 7.5 out of 10, just to actually add a critic review. But let's give an announcement here. But sometime this year, and this is going to be a big project, I am going to be filming from the ground up, not a compilation, not a would be like, oh, it's just another rehash. No. My own fan-made, almost like a documentary, kind of, it's a retrospect, a remastered remake of Matthew 2000, every NECA Godzilla reviewed. And in the video, I'm going to be going through all 24 figures in the 6-inch line, and some point in time, the 24-inch long 2014 Godzilla. Because now I do have a way of getting it. I have scraped up the money, and that'll be my next purchase. Aside from another Godzilla that I'm aiming to get. But that is a story for another day. But right as of now, you heard it from me, folks. Sometime late this year, in either October or December, for the channel's 11th year anniversary, for Godzilla's 72nd anniversary, and the line's 12th year anniversary. That is going to be my dedication to all 3 of those things. Because I believe that this line does deserve its final swan song of send-offs, I guess. If you don't know what that scratching is, my cats are fighting in that. But that is my big project announcement. This line has meant a lot to me, and I'm so happy that we're finally capping it off. But with that said, we still technically have one more figure to go, but this is the end of the 6-inch range, which is what NECA really classifies as the Godzilla line. I don't know why they just pretended like the 24-inch long didn't exist, but this is it. Every Godzilla figure has at least been reviewed to some capacity. Anyway, that's been me. My name is Matthew, and this has been Matthew T.O.S.G. Thank you for watching, and thank you, NECA. No, really, thank you. You guys really have no idea what this line meant to me. I really hope that someday you guys do return. Maybe starting out with -1 or the New Empire. Because that just screams you. I know you guys like repaints. And you could literally crank out like 3 repaints per sculpt with that. Playmates did it, so you guys can too. But with that said, that's your choice. You guys don't want to return, fine. I'm okay with that. I have them all. But as for what comes next, we'll see. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, everyone.